Hey, good evening, everyone. Hey, before we begin, we do have overflow seating in the Tony Hill room, which is immediately across the street. So that has access to video, and if anyone wants to speak, we'll make sure that that happens. But it's just, we've had issues sometimes where the aisleways have been blocked, and the fire marshal kind of gets concerned when we don't have access to exit and also free movement of people that are here in the room. So I just wanted to just make that announcement. There is room at the Tony Hill room, which is across the street at the Civic Center. It's on the right-hand side. Also, I believe that is the speaker on outside? No? We could also turn on the speaker on the outside if people wanted to wait and listen as the meeting proceeds. Again, you'll be given the opportunity to speak, anyone who wants to speak to this matter as far as public comment. Okay? So I just wanted to welcome everyone to our 7 p.m. session of the September 25th, 2018 meeting of the Santa Cruz City Council. I'd now like to ask the clerk for a call of the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members Crone.
Here.
Matthews. Here. Chase. Here. Brown. Here. Noroyan. Here. Vice Mayor Watkins. Here. And Mayor Terrazas.
Here. Okay, we have one sole item on this evening's agenda. This is the 1930 Ocean Street extension, plan development permits and tentative map to construct apartment condo development within 10 4-unit buildings. This is a public hearing, and as a reminder, the order will be first a staff presentation, followed by questions of staff from the council. We'll then turn to the public for any comments, and then we'll return back to the council for deliberation and action. So that's the format for our meeting this evening. There's been a couple of requests in advance for public comment as an organization. So they will be given that opportunity at the beginning of public comment, and then we'll turn to each of the visitors here to speak to the item. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Planning, Lee Butler, to kick it off and make any announcements of those that will be participating in the hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Terrazas and council members. Lee Butler, I'm the Planning and Community Development Director for the city. And we are very fortunate here to have an engaged community, and you're going to hear from that community tonight. And I imagine you're going to hear comments both in favor of and in opposition to this project. And I'd like to just frame some of the reasoning behind the staff recommendation. So you have tonight a general plan amendment request along with a rezoning, a tentative map, a plan development permit, and design permits to allow 40 attached dwelling units. Under the current zoning, only 9 single-family detached would be allowed, plus the potential for 9 accessory dwelling units. Under the current general plan, and with a rezoning to R15 zoning district, which would be consistent with the current general plan, the site could accommodate up to 19 single-family detached dwelling units and potentially 19 more accessory dwelling units. As the council and everyone in this room is surely aware, we are in the midst of a housing crisis, and the crisis is one of both affordability and availability. And our ultimate recommendation is a function of this project addressing both affordability and supply. That was certainly also a big factor in the Planning Commission's recommendation to the council that they approve the project before them tonight. And when we talk about affordability, it's not just deed-restricted affordability that we take into consideration. It's also relative affordability. In comparison to the price that the 9 single-family detached units would have on this site, or the 19 single-family detached units would have on this site, the proposed attached product is substantially more affordable. And that is a relative affordability. But it's a relative affordability that is reflective of our current market realities. According to the 2012 to 2016 American Community Survey, which is part of the U.S. Census, 54.5% of our housing stock is single-family detached residences. We have a lot of single-family detached homes, and relative to other alternatives, these are not the most affordable housing type. I also want to point out that the conditions of approval for this project would require the developer to substantially exceed the zoning ordinance requirements for inclusionary housing, for affordable housing. Whether rentals or ownership units, they would be providing 6 or 7 affordable housing units that are sorely needed in this community. So Senior Planner Ryan Bain will detail that in a moment, but I just wanted to kick this off by framing both the affordability issue that we have as well as the availability issue that we have in really being the #1 factor in our recommendation this evening. So I will turn it over to Ryan for the project specifics.
All right, good evening, Mayor and council members. What we are looking at is a project at 1930 Ocean Street Extension. Here's the site location from an aerial. It's a 2.74 acre lot located on the east side of Ocean Street Extension, approximately 400 feet from the northern city limits. The developable area is 2.21 acres. When I say developable, that's area of the site that is less than 30% slope. There's a 30% slope that abuts Graham Hill Road.
Excuse me one moment. There's a little feedback that's coming through. I don't know if it's... Okay, good.
Okay. The property does gently slope up from Ocean Street Extension and steepens just below Graham Hill Road. So the project proposal consists of 40 residential condominium units, 10 separate 4-unit buildings. It provides a mix of 12 one-bedroom units at approximately 940 square feet and 28 two-bedroom units at 1,091, manager's office, and some passive open space for the residents there. There's a sordid history here. There's a lot of background for this project. It was originally submitted in 2010. It went before the Planning Commission in October of 2010, where it was continued until further information could be provided regarding the emissions associated with mercury contained in dental amalgams from the crematorium. The project was heard again by the Planning Commission on December 2nd of 2010, where it was continued indefinitely. Without going into all the details, there was litigation from 2012 to 2016. Ultimately, there were settlements, including the relocation of the crematorium to its original location at the cemetery on the west side of Ocean Street Extension, and also the required removal of the dental amalgams prior to cremation. In September of 2016, the applicants decided to move forward with the project and have an environmental impact report prepared. There have been several opportunities for public input as part of the CEQA process. There are requirements. We did a notice of preparation. We had a public scoping meeting. Draft DIR was done, partial recirculated draft DIR. We had a community meeting and a final EIR released. This is consistent with, I should mention that the community meeting was consistent with the recent council direction regarding community outreach on larger projects. And so that community meeting was held on June 21st. The project went before the Planning Commission on August 16th, and the Planning Commission recommended approval on a 5-1 vote. There were approximately 25 people from the public that spoke at the hearing regarding a host of issues. Public input ranged from everything from drainage, chip generation, and traffic safety, impacts on Ocean Street Extension, the neighborhood, and the cemetery, the need for housing here in the city, as well as acknowledging existing green belts and the required, really, for infill development to meet those housing needs. The Planning Commission spoke when they were discussing the project. These were some of the comments talking about stressing the housing, the high priority for housing here. The units were affordable by design in terms of their size, 900 to 1,000 square feet. They acknowledged that the rental inclusionary requirement was a significant benefit of the project, that the 7 deed restricted affordable units were very important to the project, that they felt, some of them felt that the housing needs outweighed the traffic impacts of the project, that it was the opposite of sprawl, it was accessible to downtown, and that some of the commissioners expressed that, there's a lot of our traffic is generated by commuters, and so this would be bringing people into the city as opposed to having to commute from outside. So, and again, stressing our housing needs and that no neighborhood was safe from housing crisis. Oops, I was going to do a flyby video, and I forgot to bring it up. Something I forgot. I should mention, so the ocean, you probably have already seen some of this, but the applicants have their own website. So they have they did a flyby of the site. It gives a fairly good idea of. So I thought I would just go ahead and play that real quick for you. As you can see, it consists of 10 two-story, 4-unit apartment buildings, 7 of which have 2 floors of living over basement level carports. There are 3 detached carport buildings on the site, 3 detached trash enclosure structures, a manager's office. You can see the circulation through the site, pedestrian pathways, perimeter fencing. While the project is a vacant lot, there were some constraints just due to the grade and from the upper portions near Graham Hill, as well as trying to save as many of the oaks on the site as well. So they've been designed around these significant oak trees. So go ahead and stop it there and get back to my presentation here. So here's the site plan, which the flyby kind of gave you a pretty good idea of the site already. These units down here, or these buildings down here, are generally 2-story and then have the covered parking, while these units up above are 2 stories above a basement garage. This gives you a little bit of an idea of the slope starting down here at Ocean Street Extension and then up to Graham Hill. You can see it's a kind of a gradual slope, and then as it gets closer to Graham Hill, it's much steeper. These are just a couple of the elevations to give you an idea. These are the 2-story that are closer to Ocean Street Extension. Here are the 2-story over basement parking. They have a rural architectural style, design elements, kind of a vernacular sort of farm structure, employing board and bat siding, vinyl windows, wood trim, railings and trellises, as well as comp shingle roofs. The applicant submitted a preliminary landscape plan, which was reviewed and consistent with our water conservation and water efficient landscape ordinance. Per the recommendations of the arborist, 6 of the 15 trees of the subject parcel will be preserved, and the remaining 9 will be removed as they are invasive and non-native species. So there are 6 heritage oaks that'll be maintained and have been designed. The project's been designed around. Also, off-site improvements that are proposed by the applicant. They propose to improve the Ocean Street Extension right-of-way by installing a curb along the project site on the east side frontage, as well as new paving on approximately 390-foot-long portion of Ocean Street and approximately 520 feet length of new sidewalk to hook up with the sidewalk here at Graham Hill Road. There's also bioswales as well as on-street parking proposed. I should mention that there were 4 street trees that were proposed as part of the bioswales. though, however, they may not be feasible due to some underground gas lines that are there. So that'll be something we would look at further and see if that's even feasible. But I wanted to mention that it may not be feasible. Also, the applicants are proposing to improve the intersection at Ocean Street and Graham Hill extension, or Graham Hill, and to improve the turning maneuverability and traffic flow as recommended by the traffic engineer for the project. So what's being considered tonight is a general plan amendment, a zoning map amendment, plan development permit, design permit, tentative map, and certification of the EIR. So looking at our general plan and zoning map, the owners of the property are seeking a general plan amendment to change the land use designation from low density residential, which allows 1 to 10 dwelling units per acre, to low medium density residential, which allows for 10 to 20 dwelling units per acre. I just wanted to mention real quick, I know I'm reviewing a lot of the correspondence, there's a lot of reference to this being a high density housing project. Our high density housing general plan designation is actually 30 to 55. So this is low medium density. So it's 10 to 20 units. So I just wanted to clarify that. The project also requires a zoning map amendment, and that is going from R110, single family residential, to RL, which is a multiple residence low density. So in terms of what the proposed density is for the project, it's at 18 dwelling units per acre. So the proposed general plan and zoning map amendments are found to be consistent with a number of goals, policies, and programs contained in our 2030 general plan and are listed in the staff report. By allowing the low-density residential development at the project site, the proposed amendments will implement several of our city's housing element goals. A few of them being encouraging adequate diversity of housing types and affordability levels to accommodate present and future housing needs of Santa Cruz residents, providing adequate sites and supporting infrastructure to accommodate housing through land use zoning and specific plan designations that encourage a broad range of housing opportunities, providing new housing to accommodate projected employment and population growth and to meet the needs of existing residents. Also, the site is identified in the housing element as an adequate site to accommodate the city's share of the region's housing needs as part of the general plan. Taking a look at the surrounding area of the site, as I mentioned, it's about 400 feet south of the of our city line, and the county area to the north is certainly a rural character. However, as you can see, to the area to the south of the subject within the city contains a number of multiple family projects. This includes an 8-unit complex here at near the corner of Graham Hill and Ocean Street Extension, as well as 11 live-work attached units at Jewel Street. Is here, 24 condominium units at Jewel Street. There's our new 51-unit residential memory care facility here off of Jewel Street, as well as Claremont Terrace, which is 41 townhomes. So there is some multiple family residential in this vicinity. So under the city's zoning ordinance, 15% of the units are to be affordable. With a total of 40 units, the code requires 6 be affordable for sale units. The same code section indicates that no affordable units are required if the mapped units are rented, which is a provision put in place circa 2007 to promote rental housing. But earlier this year, the City Council Housing Blueprint Committee was formed to examine ways to assist with the creation of diverse and affordable housing choices for the city. And one of the committee's recommendations was to look at increasing the inclusionary requirement applicable for sale housing and to create more affordable housing. With the proposed general plan and zoning amendments to increase the density on the parcel, the project would have substantially more units than what is currently permitted, hence more affordable units. Given that additional units would be granted with the subject approvals, and given that affordable housing is perhaps the most important issue currently facing the city, staff is recommending a higher inclusionary requirement from 15 to 17.5, which would increase the required affordable units from 6 to 7. Also, while the applicants have indicated that they plan on selling the units upon completion of construction, they do have the option of renting the units. For mapped rental units, the current inclusionary housing ordinance does not require inclusionary units to be provided until the first unit is offered for sale. So rental projects with the subdivision map like this one are currently, or I should say without a subdivision map, are currently required to rent 15% of the units to lower income tenants. So in an effort to provide an increased level of affordability associated with additional density and to augment the plan development public benefit findings, staff is recommending that if the units are kept as mapped rentals, that 15% of the units be rented at an affordable rate. So instead of no rentals, we are adding a condition that 15% of them be rented as affordable if it's kept as rentals. As I mentioned, we went through an environmental review process. Here are several of the kind of the dates on the CEQA process. The final ER, which includes the draft ER and the partial recirculated draft ER. So before you can approve the project or any of the alternatives described in the final ER, the City Council must first certify that as reviewed and considered the information in the ER, that the ER has been completed in conformity with requirements of CEQA, and the document reflects the city's independent judgment. For the proposed 40-unit residential development, it was determined that the project will result in a significant adverse environmental impact due to the contribution of project trips to the Ocean Street and Highway 1 southbound off-ramp intersection, which currently operates at an unacceptable level of service. While the implementation of a mitigation measure requiring the project applicant to contribute the project's fair share of the cost of signalization, a widening of the Highway 1 southbound off-ramp at Ocean Street would reduce the impact to a less than significant level. There's an uncertainty of funding and timing of construction, not to mention the need for Caltrans approval. So therefore, we've concluded that the impact will remain significant and unavoidable, and there's a statement of overriding considerations necessary. So in order to approve a project with unavoidable significant impacts as identified by the EIR, a statement of overriding considerations must be prepared explaining why the city is willing to accept each significant effect, or in this case, a significant effect. The decision-making bodies must balance the benefits of the project over the environmental effects, setting forth the specific overriding social, economic, legal, technical, or other beneficial project aspects to support the decision. So as set forth in the government code, the city has a responsibility to facilitate the improvement and development of housing, to make adequate provision for the housing needs of all economic segments of the community. The project helps the city's long-range plan for meeting regional housing needs while balancing environmental, economic, and fiscal factors and community goals. As we've talked about, Santa Cruz has experienced issues with housing volume and affordability that are affecting the quality of life in the community. And with the city in a housing crisis, the City Council has stated that providing housing is a top priority. So the proposed project will provide much needed and relatively moderately priced housing with a level of affordability exceeding city requirements on an infill site that is within close proximity to the Ocean Street corridor and within a mile of the city's downtown. These are some things to consider. So, CEQA guidelines also require that NER describe and evaluate a reasonable range of potentially feasible alternatives to the project that could attain most of the basic objectives of a proposed project while substantially lessening at least one significant effect of the proposed project. So, consistent with these requirements, the following alternatives are evaluated in the draft EIR. Alternative 1 is looking at considering residential development under the existing general plan, which is low density residential, and the existing R110. This would result in up to 9 units on approximately 10,000 square foot lots. Under current inclusionary requirements, a 9-unit project would generally include 1 inclusionary affordable unit. Alternative 2 that was considered is if we were to consider the residential development under the existing general plan, low density, but with a rezoning to R15. So this would allow up to 19 units on approximately 5,000 square foot lots. ADUs are permitted in the R15 zoning, so there is potential for up to 38 residential units as part of Alternative 2. Alternative 3 was a approval of both the general plan amendment and the zoning map amendment, but a reduced size project. So looking at 32 as opposed to 40 units. This would generally include 5 inclusionary units. We've received quite a bit of correspondence in recent days, a lot today actually. So we're kind of going through some of these. There was a couple of revisions that we made in response to some of the correspondence. So based on, we were looking, some of the concerns had to do with the impact of the project on the neighboring cemetery across the street. So we've looked at adding a condition, which we have actually distributed, I think you have in front of you, that we added some language to the requirements to be included with the CCNRs for the project. So one of the conditions was that language be added to the CCNRs that prohibits outdoor amplified music, shouting, or otherwise disruptive behavior at the site while funeral services are being held across the street. Noise emanating from the site shall meet applicable city standards. So staff is recommending that revision be added to the conditions of approval. Additionally, staff has made some revisions to the statement of overriding considerations. This was language to correct some typos and to better clarify some of the alternatives. So these revisions have been provided to you. In conclusion, the proposed project will allow for the development of a 40-unit apartment condo development on a vacant, underutilized lot currently zoned for single-family use. The requested general plan and zoning map amendment supports the city's housing element goals of increasing housing opportunities in the community and of providing new housing to accommodate projected employment and population growth. Additionally, the project provides affordable housing that exceeds current zoning ordinance requirements. As conditioned, the proposed project meets the requirements of the zoning and subdivision ordinance and provides a residential design compatible with the surrounding area and other multi-residential developments within the city. The project has gone through extensive environmental review and is being considered at a required public hearing. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the project as proposed, and so we are therefore recommending that the City Council adopt resolutions certifying the final EEIR, adopting findings of fact, a mitigation monitoring program, and a revised statement of overriding considerations, and adopt a resolution approving general plan and zoning amendment, design permit, plan development permit, and tentative map to create a 40-lot condominium subdivision with the added condition that I mentioned just earlier. And one thing I've mentioned before, if you have any questions, as I mentioned, we did receive some correspondence that we reviewed, and one of the letters specifically was questioning whether the noticing for the project was done properly, as well as suggesting that the city's slope regulation would prohibit for-sale units on the property due to the proximity to a 30% slope. We researched both of these and as well as conferred with our city attorney, and we determined that the noticing was done properly and that the plan development code section does allow for variations to slope modification regulations. So I just wanted to clarify that. So that being said, I'm available for any questions. And
thank you for the presentation. What I'd like to do is first get a show of hands of who here would like to speak to this item. And I know there's someone over the Tony Hill room that would like to speak to it. Can you get a hand count?
Hands up. Keep them up, leave them. Thank you.
I think what I'd like to do is have I'd like to go with public comment first, and we can have speakers go forward on the side. And we did have 3 people that I recognized in advance to provide some sort of extended time because they're speaking on behalf of an organization.
Point of order, Mayor, you outlined a plan at the beginning. You said there was going to be a staff report, council questions, and then we're going to open up to public comment.
Would you? I just wasn't seeing
The same thing
anything.
this afternoon, and then the questions never happened,
Yeah.
really.
Well, yeah. Do you? I was looking over here and I saw that there was. And so I'll look over here. Do you have a question you'd like to ask before we go to public comment?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's do that.
Well, can I just say, you got it. Okay, so I'd prefer to ask my questions afterwards.
Okay.
Just in case
Great.
things come up from the audience.
Councilmember Crone, you have the floor.
Thank you. I was wondering what the rents will be for the affordable units.
I do not know if those have been calculated. Carol here, I don't. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that question.
The save as many oaks as possible, what does that mean?
They're saving all of the oaks on the property, of which I believe there are 6.
6, thank
Yeah.
you. And the wide street in the video seemed a little bit different than the street I went down today. I was wondering what that was about, like the way they portrayed the street. It was like a huge 2-lane with, areas on either side to park. I didn't understand that.
No, it's a standard 2-lane road, I believe approximately 10 foot. Sorry?
Okay, do you know, if you would please, I know this is going to be a long evening. Let's just try and keep your voices down and let the answers. You all will have time during public comment, and you could say what you'd like. But at this point, our planner has the floor, and I appreciate your respect so that we can go through this meeting in an orderly fashion. So thank you. Please.
So I believe it's a 2-lane road, so it's approximately 10 foot per lane, so 20 foot
Is there a
width.
shoulder also, or?
No, I believe that's just the paving portion. So
The developer's going to repave the road too?
that is part of it, correct?
And as far as the Graham Hill Ocean Street interchange, there's going to be a light put there, but it wasn't really in the near future, or was there a time when it was going to happen?
A signal?
A signalization of that interchange
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
at Graham Hill and Ocean Street extension, right?
Oh,
when you
Graham
get
Hill
off.
Ocean Street. No, there's no signal
signalization.
proposed there. No.
Okay. Last question is, how many cars in the 9-home scenario versus the 40 condo scenario would you estimate, or what would you expect?
I think I had that actually on the alternatives. So here's some comparisons of the alternatives for the daily trips and peak hour trips. So you can see that there.
I'm just wondering, number of cars, what would you expect? I mean, there's going to be 2 parking spaces per unit, or
Oh, we're talking
more.
about parking spaces or
Well,
trips?
well, cars, actually, just numbers of cars.
How many?
Sir,
There's 90
Excuse me.
parking spaces?
Parking space, I can look that up really quickly. They do meet, actually they exceed the parking requirements per our parking ordinance.
But we can, if there's 90 spaces, we could expect 90 cars, or that's not,
Well, they're general, and I might have our Public Works representative speak to that, but generally there isn't a correlation between required parking versus number of trips generated per day.
Okay.
They're kind of 2 different animals. But
one last one is, what is the density along Ocean Street Extension right now if the medium density would be 10 to 20 units per acre? What's more or less the units per acre as you go down Ocean Street Extension right now along the street?
it's a combination of PA and RL, and I don't know the exact. I would have to go to each parcel, obviously calculate the number of units versus the lot size to generate what the actual density is, and I haven't done that exercise. But as I had demonstrated, there's several multiple family.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
projects along there.
Thank you. I don't know if there's, Ryan, if you wanted to, if some of the questions that were unanswered, if you, the applicant wanted to address them, or if that's an option.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you,
Absolutely.
so I'll ask the applicant if there were questions that were raised that you are able to answer that were unanswered. Please feel free to do so. Now, if you'd like.
Good evening, Council. With regards to the number of cars, you were asking 9 versus the proposed 40. For single-family lots, it really depends on the number of bedrooms per house. If you think that there's going to be, on a lot this size, probably 3 or 4 bedrooms, I would think there'd be at least 3 cars, maybe 4 cars. These are 1 and 2 bedroom units. So the number of cars would be less because the number of bedrooms are less. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but that was another way of looking at it. With regards to the zoning and general plan designations, I think Ryan gave you the answer for Ocean Street extension within the city limits. And I think you were trying to ask about the entire Ocean Street extension, the portion that's in the county as well as in the city. Am I correct?
Yes.
So the area that's within the county has a mixed designation of rural residential and agriculture. So they're outside of what's called the urban services line, and they're on septic. So their densities by default would have to be lower than those within the city.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 12 bedrooms plus 28 bedrooms equals 68 cars, and the 9 houses times 4 cars is 36. So, I mean, that's a considerable, more cars in the 40.
There would be, obviously, if you've got 40 units, there's going to be more cars, yes.
Thank you.
And was there another question that you didn't get answered?
No, that was it. That was good. Thank
Okay.
you.
I had a quick one. I know.
Was there a shoulder? Is there a shoulder besides the 2 lanes? Will be room for a shoulder also, or no?
Well, I don't think there will be, because if you look at the slide that's up there right now, on the Ocean Street extension side, on the side of the cemetery, there's going to be a bioswale on that side, right adjacent to the street. Now, if there's some way to work in a shoulder with that, we would consider it, but right now that isn't the plan.
Because I noticed about, 5 or 6 cars parked there today a little bit off the street, but
Yeah.
the street is narrow.
Okay.
I had a quick question. Ryan?
Sorry.
So for the 2, the Claremont Terrace townhomes and the Jewel Street condos, what is the density zoning there? Those are along the route there, and I'm just curious, you raised those in the presentation. What's the zoning for those?
I believe those are RL zoning. I think they're the same zone, and we can double check and make sure and get back to you on
Yeah,
that.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
How much were the rents going to be for the affordables? That was a question I had.
Okay.
I don't know if she just sat down, but
Can you hold that till we come back?
will.
Okay,
I will.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Matthews or Councilmember Chase, did you have any questions? Or you want me to? Okay, so we had a show of hands, and there's one person, I'm just calling him out. He's over at the Tony Hill room, so I know he's going to speak as well. I have a few people in advance that would like to, they have additional time. They contacted me in advance, and they're going to speak on behalf of the organization. That was Randy Krasau of the Santa Cruz Memorial Park Board of Directors, Robert Singleton, Executive Director of the Business Council.
Pardon me, Mayor. I believe the applicant has a presentation as well.
Let's see. Sorry about that question. That wasn't the listing we had in the plan, but
Yeah, I think she was just answering some questions, but I think she does have a few things to speak to.
okay. I'd like to invite you up and make your presentation.
Good evening again. I will try and keep this brief. I think I have 5 minutes, but I probably won't need all 5 minutes. The council is very crystal clear and very aware of the housing crisis that we have. We are losing workforce because people that apply for jobs here discover they can't afford to live here and they look elsewhere. We have people who are working here but live elsewhere, which is contributing to our traffic problems as well. We do have ways of addressing the problem. One way is to have subsidized housing. Things like Mid-Penn Peninsula builds housing for low and very low income people, housing which is subsidized. The other way is having projects such as this one that comes in with a higher density and affordable units, which provides housing for moderate income as well as low income households. And this is the way that that type of housing gets built. There has to be some incentive in there in order to get the low income housing if it's not being subsidized. There has to be a way of doing that. So we have a project that is ideally located that provides not only affordable housing for low-income people, but for moderate-income people. We're talking about the teachers, the nurses, the engineers, people that can't afford to rent or buy housing in Santa Cruz. Excuse me, Santa Cruz. Property that we're looking at today is an infill project. As staff, they stole some of my thunder by giving some of the facts that I had down here. This property is ideally located. It is one of the very few properties that is left that can have this sort of density on it. So if we're going to capture that moderate income housing that we need, this is one of the lots that can provide that for us. In terms of affordability, we are exceeding what is being required, and I think that's a good thing. There is a general plan change that's being asked for, as well as a zoning change that's being asked for, and as a result of that, there needs to be some additional public benefit, and we are providing that. Ryan, if you could pull up the first.
You want the next?
I think that one's it. So I wanted to refer you back to the slide. Ryan showed this slide before, but if you notice, there's some red highlights on there. This slide shows you the off-site improvements that the project is making. The red highlights are things that the owners went back and added improvements to after hearing some of the concerns of the neighbors. And these have been incorporated into the plans. And back to Councilmember Crone's question on parking and the shoulder of the road, as you can see on here, there is parking being provided on Ocean Street Extension as well, even though we still are putting in the bioswale on that side. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Next slide. I wanted to also talk about the fact that 4 of the units, and it should be highlighted on here, I'm not sure why it isn't, but 4 of the units are going to be handicap accessible. So having affordable housing is difficult. Try finding housing that's handicap accessible. It's even more difficult. And with this project, you're going to get 4 of them. It's handicap accessible, and as you can see, there is a clear path of travel for parking, as well as if there was any wheelchair that wanted to get out to the sidewalk. Next slide. So there's been some question tonight, and I don't remember who asked the question about what the price or the amount of money that would be spent if these were 9 lots. These numbers indicate what those prices would be, somewhere between 1.7 and 1.9 million per lot. Yes, the owners could still make money selling these 9 lots the way that they're shown on here, but that does not address our housing crisis. That does not give you affordable housing. That does not provide housing for handicap accessibility, but it does make money. This is not what we're proposing. We're proposing something that is doing some good for the city.
Okay.
Next.
I think in terms of the format for the presentation, this was scheduled for the presentation.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Your presentation, this is part of the presentation?
This is her presentation.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this is the applicant's presentation. She provided me these slides to put up for her prior to the meeting.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So what and I'm just about done if your concern is time. What I want to say, though, is this rendering shows the sort of project that we'd like to see built on that property. We feel that the design is transitional between the urban city setting and the rural setting, which is in the county area. This is taken directly across the street from the cemetery. Actually, it's right across from the entry to the cemetery. We think that it is complementary, and in terms of the condition that staff is proposing, there is no problem with adding that condition to the project. As a matter of fact, I was just asking the owners about it. They said that it could be easily incorporated into any rental agreement or made a permanent condition as part of any purchase agreement for any of the units should they be sold. I want to emphasize they don't want to sell. They want these to be rentals because that's really where the need is. The discussion around selling has to do with what the actual cost is going to end up being depending on what gets approved. Their first choice, and if you know them, they've been doing rental properties for a number of years. Their first choice is always to rent the units out if it is possible. If it's not financially possible, or if they can't find some partnerships for people to provide some subsidies, which we don't want to do, then they may end up having to sell them, but they would still have a higher affordability. I do have something to hand out to you, and just a couple of other things to say. Can I give it? If you can go back to the handicap accessible for a second. At the Planning Commission meeting, a question came up with Mr. Krassow that was concerned about the houses looming over the chapel where the services would be taking place, where the crematorium is. I wanted to show him and all of you the area where the chapel is taking place is directly across from a parking area. The area that's in back, which is adjacent to Unit 6B, is actually the crematorium, which, if I understand correctly, is being relocated across the street. So there was sensitivity given to the area and the proximity. And we are disappointed that this came up at such a late date. We could have sat down with Mr. Krassow and talked about it. We had no idea that there was any of this concern brewing. As you see, I gave you there the document that shows their understanding that they were amending their purchase agreement to allow us to come in to apply for the RL zoning. And there has been no protests or questions or anything presented to us until the Planning Commission meeting. But even before that, we were trying to take that concern into account. So lastly, I want to say the decision tonight is, as I see it, a pretty clear one. You can either vote to address the housing crisis and the housing need with a project that is a very good project. It's not a perfect project. There are still some things that would be great if those weren't concerns. There are no perfect projects, but if you look at the good that the project is providing, which is numerous, and weigh that against the small things that are of concern to some of the neighbors and perhaps some of the commissioners, I think that we have an excellent candidate for addressing a long-standing problem that the city has, and I hope you vote in favor of the project.
Right. Thank you for providing that context. Councilmember Crone, did you want to raise that question?
Oh, about the affordable units, how much would they be being rented for in the market, one-bedroom and two-bedroom units?
Yeah, give me a second. Okay. If you go to, did you get the handout I just gave? If you go to the last page, and it says RL for sale.
Yes.
So the market rate unit is 550,000, and that annual income for somebody in that, for the market rate unit, is $145,000. The low to very low income isn't shown on here, but that would be around 360, and that would be low, and actually not very low, that would be low income. Now, for the rental, you've got approximately 28 a month for the market rate. And then I'm not sure what the rents are because they do fluctuate for the affordable housing rents. But it's whatever the city sets as the rental limits.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll call up as part of the staff. Do you want Planning Director Lee Butler to conclude the presentation?
I can address the question in terms of the rental rates.
And I'll just answer one quick question. You had asked about the zoning on the neighboring properties, specifically Claremont Terrace. Those are actually zoned RM, excuse me, which is a multiple family zoning, which is a density just higher than the RL that's being proposed. The RL, as I mentioned, is 10 to 20 units per acre for Claremont Terrace, and the neighboring previously mentioned multiple family it's 20 to 40 units per acre. So it's basically double what's being proposed on this site.
Thanks.
And for the affordable units, the rent, you'll recall this afternoon we had the discussion with the 40% household income, which is the current standard. So at the 40% household income, the studio would be $1,544. The one bedroom would be $1,776, and two bedrooms would be $2,008 for two bedrooms.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll go back. Are there any other questions, Councilmember Crone? No? Okay, good. So there were a few people that contacted me in advance to have additional time as part of an organization. That was Randy Krasow of the Santa Cruz Memorial Park Board of Directors, Robert Singleton, the Executive Director of the Business Council, and then is Jessica here?
Hello.
Did you also?
Yes. So the Ocean Street Extension Neighborhood Association.
Ocean Street Extension Neighborhood Association.
Yep, and it'll be Lauren Crux
Okay,
speaking
just
for us.
want to make sure.
Thanks.
You were here. Okay, so I will call up, if you'd like to go first, Jessica, would you like to?
You're on, Lauren.
Go. Okay, you'll have 4 minutes. And then next up will be Robert Singleton from the Business Council, then Randy Krasow.
Thank you. My name is Lauren Crux, and I'm speaking on behalf of Ocean Street Extension Neighborhood Association. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will read so I don't ramble. Santa Cruz has a housing crisis. We all know that. But a politics of fear produces hasty and/or unwise decisions. The developers are well liked by the city, and they have done good projects. But not every project is a good one, and 1930 Ocean Street Extension is not a good one. We have over 700 signatures opposing this project, and may I have a show of hands of how many people here oppose this project? Okay. We had a deal. The deal was the general plan. We would develop housing close to services, schools, etc. Housing would start in the core of the city and move outward. We had a deal that rural areas would be protected, that neighborhoods would be respected. We had a deal that together we would address traffic and housing. Despite what the developers claim, this project does not provide truly affordable housing. It is not a walkable friendly area. It is not near services, groceries, parks, and schools. Traffic is already at a crisis point, and it is a one-lane road, by the way. It is in direct contradiction to everything that the general plan calls for, and it will destroy a street that is beloved by hundreds. Tonight, undoubtedly, and you already have, but you'll hear more passionate pleas for housing for nurses and teachers. But I know very few nurses and teachers that can afford $2,800 a month rent. The plan does not provide Santa Cruz workforce housing other than those 7 units, which is not enough. It gives us more of what we already have. We're way over the percentage that was required for median income housing. This is not what we need. You also will probably hear tonight that if you don't allow the developers their 40 units, they will just have to build 9 McMansions. At least this is what they said at the Planning Commission. These are polarizing and bullying arguments. There are other alternatives. The developers have said that if there are too many requirements, they might sell the units for something between $400,000 to $600,000. I doubt that. Comparable tandem parking units nearby sold for $725,000 to $850,000. This is not affordable housing. Mr. Odermatt, as consulting city architect who did a design review on this project, considered it ill-designed and inappropriate to the site. Why would you dismiss his concerns? The developers have refused input from us. When asked if they were willing to compromise on this project, they said no. Uncomfortable facts and concerns about this project have been swatted away time and time again, despite hundreds of hours of collective input from citizens to the EIR and the project. Not a single change has been made, although I hear tonight there's a little action in that direction. This is not a good process. This is not due process. And it certainly has not been a transparent process. Keep your promise to us. You don't have to decide tonight. We are not the obstructionists. We are not opposed to housing. We do not support McMansions. Instead, we want compromise. We want an appropriate development for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to now, thanks. I'd like to invite up Robert Singleton from the Business Council.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Robert Singleton, and I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Cruz County Business Council, which is a consortium of the 80 largest employers in Santa Cruz County. Our mission is to advocate on behalf of policies and programs that promote economic and community vitality, not only for our businesses, but also for our employees, their families, and the community at large. Every year, we do a poll of our members about these issues that are affecting their businesses and their quality of life. We then take the results of that poll and create a strategic plan about what our advocacy priorities are and are going to be for the next year. I've been at the Business Council going on 6 years now, and every year the number one issue has always been the same. It's housing. The bottom line is that there is a consensus amongst those in the local business community that we do not have enough housing units to meet the needs of those who live and work in Santa Cruz, and the economic consequences of this shortfall are severe and tangible. Not only can we not attract and retain teachers, firefighters, and police officers, but we are struggling with middle managers and line cooks even. And many of those who choose to work in Santa Cruz must commute from further and further away, worsening the traffic situation for everyone south of us. I tell you all of this not because you're unaware, for you most certainly are, but to express my own level of disbelief and frustration as to how it can be acceptable to fight against the housing that's being proposed today that we so desperately need. To put this in perspective, I can barely get my members to agree on a meeting location, let alone what to do on traffic on Highway 1. But guess where everyone is in full agreement? Housing. More of it, wherever we can get it, yesterday. So here I am before you today, asking you, if not pleading with you, please support this project, and certainly don't limit it to 9 single-family mansions. I mean, we don't have a lot of land left in the city, and certainly not a lot this close to our main commercial corridor. And we are going to take one of our last available pieces of open land and only allow single-family homes after an 18-month housing listening tour. We need denser housing. We need rental housing. This property has been vacant and waiting to get to this point for over 11 years. 11 years. I'm not even going to use my normal quip of comparing that to my lifespan because it's just not funny anymore. It's sad. Because that's what it takes to get any housing around here. 2 local developers, some old land, 11 years, and maybe a prayer that one day a project can happen. Well, here I am, folks, and the finish line is only a couple hours away. Let's do this.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Randy Crossow, Santa Cruz Memorial Park Board of Directors. No, you have 4 minutes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Terrazas, Vice Mayor Watkins, council members. I want to thank you all for visiting Santa Cruz Memorial Park over the last few weeks. I could speak tonight about the many problems that we see in the proposed project, from density and an incompatible design to historic buildings, to the lack of recreational space, from buildings too tall to tandem parking. We could talk about the inappropriateness of changing a general plan or changing the zoning. We could talk about all those things. But we've given all of those to you in our written objections and concerns about this property. Nothing I can say tonight can add much to that. We could even perhaps talk about what we would gain, which of course would be housing and considerable financial gain for Mr. Moe and Mr. Rao. But I want to speak tonight to what we're going to lose with this project. Like many of you, I have seen Santa Cruz lose places close to our hearts, like the Cooper House from a natural disaster or natural bridges from the power of the sea. A great many of us have special places around town. And usually that's because we grew up there, we lived there, or something like that. But Santa Cruz Memorial Park and Ocean Street Extension is special to not just folks in the city, but the county and the state as well, because of who they have there. When families entrust Santa Cruz Memorial with loved ones, it's not just a body that they leave with us. It's a mom and a dad who cared for them and raised them. It's a siblings they fought with growing up, and it's a spouse who loved them. I've seen grandparents of 12-year-olds at our mausoleum every single day for over 10 years in a row, visiting a place of rest. I've seen police officers honor fallen comrades by staying with them around the clock for 5 days in our Hillside Chapel. I've seen just today over 250 devotees of one of this area's great Hindu teachers gather at the crematory for hours to be with him as he completes his journey on this earth. Amongst all of that grief and despair that I have witnessed, I've also seen the magic of Santa Cruz Memorial Park and Ocean Street Extension. I've seen its quiet solitude and natural beauty comfort. I've seen families at funerals begin a service in tears and leave in laughter and joy, having shared stories and remembrances. I've seen the healing power of this special place where people can mourn, where they can remember, where they can be lost in their thoughts, a place of quiet solitude where they can heal. That can all be lost with a project of this size, with buildings 34 feet tall and some of them less than 28 feet from our chapel. We'll see what we lose when we have balconies overlooking funerals, noise, cars, and sights of everyday life in a project so condensed on this tiny hillside. Those things will change this special place forever. Over 150 years of history and service altered. Thousands of people's experience at Santa Cruz Memorial now and in the future will be forever diminished. But it doesn't have to be like that. I believe if we all work together, the developers and the neighbors, the city officials and residents, a project of a much more moderate size could be designed to minimize the impact on Santa Cruz Memorial, lessen the concerns of the neighbors, protect this special place and the work it does for the community, and still provide the developers with a reasonable return on their investment. That isn't this project, however. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Let's just, okay, thank you. let's set some ground rules because we're going to have a lot of speakers tonight, and it's going to be everybody's going to have their opinion one way or another on the project, and it's important that we allow everybody the opportunity to speak, and we listen respectfully, and also take in these comments. And I ask you all as we go on this trip together that you kind of refrain from like outbursts or anything, so that we can kind of make sure that we're going through in a way where we can hear everyone and we're getting that feedback in a direct way. So I respectfully ask you to do that. And before we get to your individuals' comments on this, I want to ask any parents of kids that are here that might be going to school. I'd like to allow you the opportunity if you wanted to speak first, so you don't have to wait in line if you need to get going, if you want to do that, or if the kids are here by themselves, if they want to speak. That's something where at least it gives them an opportunity, the parents with kids to have your comments heard at a reasonable time so you can get back at home. So are there anyone with kids? I see one gentleman coming up, or any? No? Yeah. Okay, so you are? Okay, so no other parents with kids, so you'll be the only speaker on that, and then I'll go right into the line. So, sir, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Ethan Sanford. I'm a teacher, UCSC graduate, longtime resident of Santa Cruz, and I live on Ocean Street Extension with my wife and 2 daughters. I am not against development on this land, but I am strongly against the quadrupling of housing density proposed by this project. Your vote tonight is the template, is the precedent for how future development occurs in Santa Cruz. It will guide whether future developers and their projects purely see land in the city as a resource to exploit, or whether the city requires money-first developments to adhere to the planning principles of common good first, money second. Leadership is not about short-term decisions. It is about setting a long-term trend for a common good. Santa Cruz is loved for its natural beauty and its eclectic humanity. People love Santa Cruz because it isn't overbuilt San Jose by the ocean. It isn't Southern California. We love Santa Cruz because people like you and me have prevented flagrant money-first developments. People like you and me have said no to paving over the natural beauty of this town without a clear and overwhelming common good. This development is clearly a money-first development, simply. Let me illustrate how. This is a bad deal for the city. The developers purchased this land at a price that reflected the current zoning and general plan designation, which allows 9 dwellings. Your staff is supporting changing the general plan to more than quadruple the density. This is an unbelievable windfall for the developers, and what common good comes from this unheard of exception? All that is achieved is 7 affordable units, just one more than every developer is required to provide. Is this the best deal that the city can negotiate for the general plan amendment? Is this the standard you are telegraphing to all future developers? The general plan was created through consensus. It shouldn't be sold cheap. The current general plan designation, the current one, has the potential to result in 10 affordable units. One inclusionary and 9 ADUs. I have more, but my time's up.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Hello, City Council. My name is Michael Bates. I live in Paradise Park, down the street from Ocean Extension. When I first heard about this project, I wanted to understand the merits of it, and I do work that's similar to these issues, so I am not, in my opinion, a layman, but I understand the size, the density, the setback issues. So I wanted to understand if I was going to be in support or not of this project. I think this project is what the city needs for affordable housing. I think that's far more important in what is needed rather than 10 individual homes. I design individual homes. Really what you're looking at when you look at those 10 buildings, if it was 9 homes, they would be very similar to those sizes. You'd have your setbacks that are required front, back, and sides. You'd have a project that in scale would look very similar to this, but it would be 10 or 9 expensive mansions. I think the city, and all of the reasons they've given you, I think those are sound reasons. And I think that's why when the Planning Commission looked at this, they saw that being sound reasoning. So I suggest that it's better for us to take care of the problems we need for housing and affordability than it is to change the project for it being simply large, custom, multi-million-dollar homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Julie Mascareñas, and my family and I are city residents on Crossing Street, right downslope from the proposed development. And there are quite a few problems with this project. You'll probably hear more about them tonight, but we're particularly concerned with the increase of storm runoff it would cause, increasing flooding damage to our property downslope. We've already flooded twice in the past 2 years from runoff. Not the river, from runoff that could not be contained by the current drainage system. We have been told that it floods in other city streets too, and the city council would need to decide whether our location warrants general funds to fix the problem. This is not the point. The other flooding, much of it is caused from river overflow, and I'm talking strictly about upslope runoff. Worse runoff can be prevented by not approving the project as designed. The requested zoning change for inappropriate density here at this location would add large impervious surfaces. This is paired with an inadequate and contradictory drainage plan in the available documents, and moreover, there are important documents from the stormwater file in the city that are missing, and namely the Public Works review of these plans. We've tried to get information repeatedly, various residents, and we have not been able to. The general plan also references municipal code standards for drainage improvements required in conjunction with new construction. Specifically, while underground storm drains are designed for 10-year storms, surface facilities such as channels must be designed to withstand the effects of a 100-year storm without substantial damage to property. Why is this code being ignored? We're very upset about this. It costs nothing to deny a new construction permit until drainage issues can be resolved. We've been swatted away repeatedly, and as a taxpayer, that makes me extremely angry.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi there, I'm Kersha Durham, and I'm speaking for the Sierra Club. We are over 7,000 members in our chapter, and the Sierra Club is against this project for many reasons. We find it entirely inappropriate. Rezoning an area for 40 units and adding almost 300 daily car trips is unconscionable. It will result in unmitigated increase in traffic, reduced open space, will have an increased demand, unlike the EIR says there will be a significant demand on water and infrastructure. And of course, as a Sierra Club, this will adversely affect our wildlife and our climate, which we see as the ultimate housing. That's our ecosystem, the earth, our nest. Ocean Street Extension, this project is not the area. It's not the area to support infill. Development in this area that is currently open space to dense housing, to denser housing, does not abide by our city's general plan, nor our city's corridor plan. So this area we see is like the last fragment of rural beauty, some land that provides habitat for an abundance of wildlife already, and also for us as humans, just to know that there's space. The increased traffic caused by this project will further exacerbate our current traffic problems along Highway 17, Highway 1, the intersection down there at Ocean Street Extension. The elimination of a bike path along Ocean Street Extension will cause more people to drive because it doesn't feel safe. There's no substantial benefit proposed by this project, which is required for a variance. The benefit for a sidewalk is not significant enough. So ultimately, the EIR's assertion that this increased demand on water is not significant is totally false. The EIR asserts that under existing conditions, there are adequate supplies, but your own Water Supply Advisory Board found that this increased population will stress our water and our quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Sarapir Nazar. I've lived right above this lot at 316 Tanner Heights since 1977, and we've seen the traffic flow there for 41 years since when it was a deserted road, Graham Hill Road, to today, when in the past 3-4 years we see traffic backed up well past Tanner Heights and Corday Lane. On many days, we can't even leave the house at the time of our choosing. So in case you're in an emergency, you have to leave the house. And everybody knows Santa Cruz is everybody's beach town in Northern California, the Greater Bay Area, Central Valley. Everybody comes to Santa Cruz, and everybody knows all the highways converge right at that point. Highway 1, 17, Ocean Avenue, Graham Hill Road, all of these, Highway 9, all of them converge right there. And much more serious than a housing crisis, we have a traffic crisis that is going to get worse regardless of whether this project gets built or not. And so this is already a big crisis, and I personally don't want to move away from Santa Cruz, but if things get worse, I'm considering about moving away from Santa Cruz. Now, planting 40 units right in the middle of this already crisis point that is naturally going to get worse, we have a city problem other than this little project that's like planted right in the middle of it. That's all I can say. The traffic is completely ridiculous. You can't get out of the house in case you can go to Scotts Valley, but forget anywhere else. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Seipert. I'm here in support, offering support for this project. I would encourage you to visit other projects that they have completed that are similar to this type of project. They always leave the neighborhoods more beautiful and functional than when they got there. They're very sensitive to the neighbors and environment, to our community, and they're responsible builders who also live and work here. In addition, they use a majority of labor and services of local businesses, which also helps keep our community thriving. I am second of 4 generations living and working here for over 60 years in the Santa Cruz County. Already 2 of my daughters have had to move out of the area so they can afford to live. I think a project like this will give us local residents affordable living options, noting that the number of affordable units offered for this project has exceeded the required percentages. I also believe that Rick and Craig have gone above and beyond the call of duty to make sure that all the environmental concerns have been addressed and resolved. I think that with 11 years of preparation since the application was originally submitted, that they've done their due diligence, and that 11 years has far exceeded any other builder in this town's project approvals. Most importantly, I feel that 40 units is an opportunity to help with our community's desperate need for housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Alexia Garcia, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership in support of the 1930 Ocean Street development. In Santa Cruz, median rent is $3,200, with the average renter earning only $14 an hour. With too many unable to afford rent and too many that are left homeless, it's clear that our community is in the midst of a housing crisis. However, I believe that this issue is more than statistics. Personally, I've experienced the housing shortage firsthand. Coming from a family of immigrants, I understood that my path to higher education would not be an easy one. However, while the housing shortage is certainly not a new phenomenon, I was still shocked to find that access to housing is nearly impossible here. I and others face the nearly impossible challenge of trying to be successful students when trying to climb a mountain of debt that results from the cost of tuition and is compounded by the extremely high costs of housing. Today, I live in an apartment with 8 other students, and I do so in an attempt to balance a crowded living situation with an equally crowded schedule. I hope to one day return to this community and continue contributing and making a positive difference. But as I stand here today, I don't know that I'll be able to afford living in the city that I love and call home. I guess what I'm asking you tonight to do is to consider the countless constituents and residents that look like myself but aren't able to speak in support of the project. They are countless residents, contributors, all to our collective good, and simply cannot afford to live where they go to school, work, and add to our community's vibrancy. Access to housing is vital to our community's economic, environmental, and overall health. With this in mind, I urge you to approve the 1930 Ocean Street Extension development so that our community can begin making a dent in its housing shortage. Because while there is no single solution to the housing shortage, this development offers a realistic step towards increasing housing production and addressing Santa Cruz's housing needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I represent Lorenzo Rhoda, represent the Villa Granada Homeowners Association. We're a 20-unit development built in 1979 at the corner of Jewel and Ocean Street. We'd like to state our opposition of the increase from 10 units to 40 units. We support a moderate amount of increase, the alternative to, say, 20 units. Our reasons are the traffic is at a critical mass on that street. Especially when there's any kind of impingement of traffic on Highway 1. Things are backing up to really crisis proportions along that whole corridor, and it's also unsafe. Also, we don't think the development's consistent with the organic farms further down the street and the rural nature of the area as you proceed down the Ocean Street extension. And in conclusion, so we do support a more moderate development. We think the 40 is way over, is untenable, not sustainable for that area. And we will support the efforts of the Ocean Street Neighborhood Association to battle this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mayor, Council, I am George Cameron. I've lived here for 40 years and I raised my family here. Our city is blessed with both extreme beauty and uniqueness. The City Council unanimously adopted the 2030 General Plan. My hopes that our city would maintain and improve our blessings blossomed anew. In regards to the 1930 Ocean Street Extension Condominium Project, I have compiled the attached list of some 70 points that the developers are requesting exemption to or simply ignoring from the General Plan. The General Plan's goal is to maintain and improve the quality of life in Santa Cruz. By definition, exemptions from the General Plan take us the other way. A project that is so blatantly contradictory to the General Plan's goals even being considered boggles the mind. Approving this project would be like telling one's doctor, yes, I want to be healthy and I promise to follow your recommendations to exercise and lose weight, then going home to lounge on the couch and watch 7 hours of television while eating a couple of 18-inch pepperoni pizzas. Approving this project would encourage and perpetuate the driving culture and associated problems that we all complain about, rather than trying to improve our lives by striving to meet the General Plan's goals. Like many for-profit diet scams, the project's accompanying EIR is full of dreams, misleading claims, and inaccuracies. It seems to have been created to check the box, rather than a careful and honest evaluation of the impact of this project. Please, I urge you, send it back to be done correctly. By certifying a document done to check the box, you will be encouraging and participating in another public pain for private gain scheme. This project brings to mind one of Joni Mitchell's great lyrics from the 60s. You don't know what you've got until it's gone. Approving the project and the damage that comes with it cannot be undone. Please do not approve the project nor certify the accompanying EIR. Take the high road and work towards improving Santa Cruz by adhering to the General Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is William Brooks, and I'm for this project. I was originally biased against it because I have a friend that lives down that street that I visited, and it's a beautiful, quiet street. I am a developer, however, and I just developed a project on Ocean Street Extension at the corner of Ocean and Jewel. 11 townhouses. You could throw a rock and hit this project. I know the neighborhood. Traffic seems to be the main concern, and Chris Crone's right. There'll be more traffic with 40 places or units than 10 houses. But think of the context. Let's think of Ocean Street Extension, which is probably a mile and a half long, as a football field 100 yards long. This project is only 4 yards down that 100 yards, and Ocean Street Extension is a dead-end street. There's nowhere to go. There's no reason for traffic to be going back and forth there. So I don't believe it'll really change that neighborhood at all, except for the first 4 yards, and there's no houses that it even drives by. This project meets all the development rules that there are. We need the supply, and I would strongly urge you to approve the project.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I've lived here for 53 years, born and raised, and I'll be short because I know you have the facts. I just want to tell you that this is my town, and I believe that we need more housing for people who care and believe in this community. This is a social justice issue. It's a have and a have-nots. And we need to have more people in homes where they feel safe and they can make a living and contribute to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Again, you don't have to use the full 2 minutes. Go ahead.
You needed to say that right before me, right?
Oh, no, you can use 2 minutes. I wasn't intended to you.
Good evening, Mayor Terrazas, council members. My name is Rafael Hernandez. I'm with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. We recommend approval of the 1930 Ocean Street Extension project. We have engaged many of our members and individual stakeholders in supporting this project. Many of them you've heard from directly. These include civic and business leaders from EJ Insurance Services, Watsonville Coast Produce Inc., Blue Water Construction Inc., Santa Cruz Works, the Santa Cruz Area Chamber, even organizations or institutes like the SoCal Union Elementary School or Santa Cruz Homeless Services Center. These business leaders speak for themselves, and they reflect what they see as a tremendous need in our community for more affordable housing. The developers have spent more than 11 years of work on this project, giving genuine consideration to all concerns, including traffic and water impact, drainage, and neighborhood compatibility. The thing that I also see as residents of Santa Cruz of California is we inherit its climate, its sunshine, its diversity, culture, coast, terrain, as well as its earthquakes, fires, and droughts. We can't exist, because we do not, in a bubble of some of those and not the others. We also inherit our economy and our different issues. With that, seeing this project, I feel, has to be considered in that context as well. I thank you for your courage and leadership to ensure that we continue to make meaningful progress towards serving all of our residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is John Swift. I strongly support the rezoning and development application for 40 units on this property. The city made a commitment long ago, which I strongly supported, to establish an urban limit line and develop the remaining vacant and underdeveloped land inside the limit line as efficiently as possible. While successfully achieving the first goal of establishing an urban limit line and green belt, we have failed miserably at the second. Allowing 9 or 10,000 square foot lots, 10,000 square foot lots would do little to contribute to our needed housing stock when compared to the significant addition of 40 moderately sized and priced homes. Undoubtedly, people will complain about traffic and parking, as you've heard tonight. To argue that driving on our streets at speeds possible only for the last 100 years in the entire history of mankind between 3:30 and 5:30 p.m. is a greater priority than providing housing is a sad statement of our priorities. This property is well suited for the proposal of 40 units, is in close proximity to downtown, walking distance for many, and certainly biking distance for most. City services are available to the site. Freeway access is immediate. Global warming is real. The automobile generates the vast majority of greenhouse gases. The right to drive one's automobile unencumbered by others can no longer be considered sacrosanct and a priority that trumps housing, health, and even the very survival of our planet. Yes, a few more cars on the road will create an inconvenience for some. In the overall scheme of things, this inconvenience is of minor importance compared to our community's need for more housing. Alternatives to the personal automobile as the only means of travel are gaining momentum. Let's plan for the future rather than follow the past self-destructive land use and transportation patterns. I hope you will vote for this project and approve the addition of 40 moderately priced homes and 7 low-income homes. Significant difference to our housing stock. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mayor, council members, my name is Thornton Kotz. I'm an attorney for Santa Cruz Cemetery Corporation. My board and Mr. Krasau, who is part of that board, don't object to the development. These developers have done good projects. We just think that the project is too large for this parcel. I'd like to just mention some of the issues with the EIR. The EIR doesn't adequately reflect the impact on the cemetery. It essentially treats the cemetery as a non-entity. It never really deals with the views from the cemetery. In fact, the cemetery will be affected most by this project. The cemetery is a cultural resource that's listed in the city's historical building survey. The cemetery represents a large part of the history of this whole city. And I know many of you have family members who are there. And this project is going to sit above this. One of the problems that we have is this ordinance on sound. People are still going to be making noise, and it will interfere with services. It will change the entire character of the cemetery. Now, besides the increased traffic on Ocean Street, there is the possibility, and most of you have seen it, of residents cutting through the cemetery. We can't shut all the gates because we do want people to visit the cemetery. But if you want to skip taking that left turn, many of these residents, and this is going to be 40 units, it's going to be 80 cars possibly, and we're worried about people coming through the cemetery, driving through. It's going to be like a park for people's dogs and what they come with. And it is like a park in a lot of ways, and we do want people to enjoy it, but not that many people. And we are concerned about injury to children who may come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Brant Harrod. I'm a 38-year resident of Tanner Heights Drive, mayor, city council. I'd like to quote the one dissenting vote at the Planning Commission. He said, "It's a very nice project, but not at this location." And I think that kind of summarizes what a lot of people are thinking here. At this size, it just doesn't work. And this particular commissioner suggested alternative one would be a better fit. We're throwing the word affordable around like it's a magic word, and it's just going to make magic things happen here. A teacher in Santa Cruz makes $63,000 a year on average. They can't afford the $2,000 to $3,000 a month rent that will happen on the 33 non-affordable units, and they certainly don't qualify to buy a $550,000 condo. It's not going to happen. The people that are going to buy these are the people in San Jose who can plunk down $500,000 in cash. My cousin makes $60,000 and has a family of 4 in this town. He can't buy one. Finally, traffic, but a slightly different take on it. I'm on emergency call. That means when I get a call, I got to go. Now, traffic gets backed up all the way to Old Graham Hill Road on Graham Hill and Ocean Street in that area. I have to drive up to Sims Road to get out. And one of the commissioners, the planning commissioner, said, well, traffic's bad everywhere now. An extra 100 cars isn't going to make any difference. I beg to differ. It'll make a substantial difference to me when I have to go on an emergency call. So I'll leave it at that. You've already heard my people's thoughts on the general plan. I think we have a general plan for a reason.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Evening. My name is Mark Droback. I've spent 24 of my 50 years in the city on Tanner Heights Drive, directly across from the development. And I'm fairly confident you're not getting the fact, because even tonight we have, I don't know. We'll get back to that. This may change. Inline is not the time to rewrite your statement, so this could be a train wreck. But I'm going to skip the different exceptions for the development. I'm going to suggest that the number of car trips are totally based on a guesstimate. We have no idea how many people will inhabit these units, how many vehicles they will have, and how many daily trips they will make. At this point, I thought they were being sold. Now maybe it's just myself that's confused about whether they're being sold or rent, and consequently whether or not, or subsequently whether or not 6 or 7 affordable units are going to be required or allotted. I was thinking that there was this grand token of a single extra affordable unit as this giant gesture of the pureness of their hearts and not the millions and millions of dollars they stand to reap from this project. But now that's not even clear to me because I don't know if we have a definitive answer if they're being sold or not. And I could go on for another, how much time? 39 seconds. Hey, I'm going faster than I thought. Okay. So what I'm really curious about, 20 different things. What happened to project-ready plans before approval? For one. And why has this not been soundly rejected much earlier? In my experience, these exceptions would not be extended to private individuals applying for the most basic permit. Here, the public gets an incongruous development, traffic and safety burdens in a corridor that already has level of service ratings of D's and an F, without possibility of remedy. If anyone here thinks that they're going to, in our lifetimes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Yeah. Okay, next speaker, please.
Tim Willoughby speaking for Affordable Housing Now, and we submitted our comments in writing, so I would just like to highlight a couple of things make you think about before you cast a vote. The first one is that using the criteria that the neighbors have brought, that they want you to bring to bear on this project, using that criteria, most of them wouldn't be here tonight because their house wouldn't have been allowed. I think that's very important for you to think about. Second thing is what staff pointed out, that this is one of the very rare infill lots left where you can have this kind of a development. That's very rare, and you need to take advantage of this opportunity. So we'll repeat our mantra. It takes money, it takes land, and it takes political will. The developer has the money. This is a perfect piece of land, or almost perfect piece of land, one of the few left. So, and it just takes your political will. So please pass this on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Possible to get that slide up there?
Yeah, hold on one second. Which slide are you talking about?
There was the one that showed where Ocean Street Extension hits Graham Hill Road.
So the layout that showed the road and the transport. Okay.
Thank you.
Please, there it is. Go ahead. Your time's going.
It is. There it is. Oh, no. Okay. Hi, Clark Kodaga here. 20-year resident off Graham Hill Road and 50-year lifelong resident of Santa Cruz, 5th generation. Kids will be 6th generation. Right now, I sent you all a letter. Hopefully you all got it. And hopefully everybody took the time to read it. It's time to be a leader. Right now, the popular thing and the fashionable thing is affordable housing. Obviously, from what you've heard here today, everybody in this room would agree this is not affordable housing. The Mid-Penn thing, that's a totally different scenario. It's a good place at the right location. This is not the right location. It's the wrong development at the wrong location. I'm going to skip to a couple of things that people have not really hit. People have focused, Mr. Brooks focused on the Ocean Street extension. Actually, Graham Hill Road is one of the 3 major arteries that goes all the way to past Boulder Creek. We're talking emergency services for seniors. This is not adequate. I live just up the road. It can take even 5-10 minutes to pull out onto Graham Hill Road to take my kids to school, to go to work, to go back and forth. These are not there's not walking, biking neighborhoods. Somebody made a comment that they could walk downtown. That's a joke. Look at the sidewalks on Ocean Street Extension. There is no ADA accessibility, 0. And this is just, it's amazing that a few years ago, what were we all talking about? Water. We don't have enough water. We don't have enough water for all of our properties. Now all of a sudden it's build, build, build. Are we back in the 80s? What's going on here? You know, the real estate market is going to fall. It will happen. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No, but it will. It's all cyclical. I'm in real estate. I understand it. But this is not fair with what you're doing to this. There's thousands of residents above this because we're on the edge of the city limits that have not been included in this conversation. And I've talked to 100 of them, and they're all against it.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name is Ben Wolf. My family has been in Santa Cruz since 1944. I was fortunate to grow up in this town and in this community, and I would like to talk about my neighborhood in the 80s. I lived on the Upper West Side. It was a great neighborhood. Next door to me was Dick and Darlene. Dick cleaned carpets, and Darlene worked for a local school. Across the street was Mary Lou. She was a single mom. Her mother lived there with her. She raised her daughter, and she was a checker at Safeway. Down at the end of the block was my aunt and uncle. They both worked up at UC Santa Cruz. On the corner was Mr. Webster. He was the minister at our church. And on the other side of the block was Mr. Towner, who was our principal at Westlake Elementary.
Yep.
Remember. So I'd just like to say to you, or ask you this question, I should say, where do these people live in our community today? And with that, I urge you to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Jacqueline Griffith, 37-year resident, and I do not live in that area. I visit there for my family often. So I'm not a neighbor with these things. I see it because of traffic and safety. I mean, there are many good points that people have made, but I want you to think, if you can think of all the things that feed into that. My experience of Graham Hill Road is that it's a highway coming down there, and then it's got to get on to the freeway, and then it's got people coming off, and people coming from 17 and having to cross under that little bridge. So they want to put a sidewalk on the cemetery side, but you would never allow your kids, you wouldn't allow a grown-up that you cared about to take a bicycle, let alone to try to walk in to town from there. Because, okay, you can go down the sidewalk, and then suddenly you've got the entrance to the freeway. Well, if you put a stoplight any of those places, you're just backing up from 17, which is already down Ocean Street, blocking streets further down towards town, plus blocking the 17 coming off. If you block Graham Hill coming down, slow it down in order to let kids walk not only across the on-ramp, but under the narrow little bridge, and then across the people coming frantically trying to get through to turn left onto Ocean Street Extension, because the cars have backed up behind them to the point where Highway 1 is getting blocked. It goes all the way. That's now. I've seen that happen. And you're going to add all these cars to it. Anybody who has a kid there is going to have to drive them to work and to school and back. And anybody coming would not take a bicycle from there. They would drive.
Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Teresa Aquino. I know that you want to compromise here, and I fully support that in spirit. The bump in the road, however, is the Ocean Street Extension intersection at Graham Hill, the only access to this street. Almost a decade ago, the developers discovered that 25 cottages on that site would trigger expensive off-site improvements, most crucially extending the left turn lane entrance. Rather than pausing to analyze the feasibility of reconfiguring one of the weirdest intersections in town, the developers, with the encouragement of the city, instead chose to go for 40 units to cover costs. They had their architect draw up a conceptual design for the intersection, which to this day cannot hold up to scrutiny. As Jeff Larkey of Route 1 Farms recently said, "It's all about the intersection." Indeed it is. Questions about the safety and feasibility of the intersection plans went unanswered in the EIR. The city engineer and public works director responds to these critical questions with, "That will be engineered after the zoning change and entitlements." You have before you my toy truck mock-up. Do you see the problem here? A 5-foot sidewalk is not an improvement if it causes the left exit lane to be reduced to a substandard 18 feet. The developers' planning and public works have been in denial of the limitations of this location from the start. This isn't NIMBY versus YIMBY. This is lying about the creation of incredible hazards and outrageously demanding trust. Do not approve this zoning change believing that any of this is affordable. A deadly intersection is costly to all.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Council and Mayor. Malin Aldridge. I live on Ocean Street Extension. I have three main points really is about transportation, housing, and the choice that we're making for the community. I bike as often as I can, maybe 4 times a week to downtown, and that narrow entrance onto Graham Hill already really tight, and it's going to become tighter as more cars are in there. The cars coming sweeping down Graham Hill Road often overshoot. We see holes in the fence, and many times through the course of living there for the last 20 years, probably half a dozen or 8 times we've seen cars shoot off there. It's very dangerous, and this added traffic isn't going to help that at all. It's going to make it worse. One thing, we've hearing a lot about affordable housing tonight and the housing crisis. Santa Cruz can't build its way out of the housing problem we have. The reason it's awesome that people are here is because it's awesome here. We're hemmed in by the mountains and the coast and the farmland at the top and the development down south, right? So we're hemmed in, and we've got all this pressure from money from Silicon Valley. We could build 20 of what the developers are saying is going to be this great affordable thing, and it really won't make a big difference in what Santa Cruz's reality in housing. That's just where we live, and it's unfortunate. Finally, there's a false choice here between 9 McMansions and the larger development, and we could do something with those 9 that's much better than what they've showed up on the board. And I'd just like you to take a minute, maybe close your eyes and think about 3 or 4 things in town. Lighthouse Field, Meter Street, Poganip, Ocean Street Extension. Those are the gems of our community, and we need to remember to protect them. This is your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay, thank you, guys. Next speaker.
My name is Janie Davis, and I want to thank you all for all the hard work you do for us. I appreciate your service to our city. I can only imagine how hard it must be. For those of you who came out to meet with us, I want to say a special thank you. We appreciate that. I thought I'd have more time tonight to give you some details that might just perk you up, remembering what it's about to try to get through that intersection. It's not traffic as much as it is danger, and adding any additional traffic to it won't work. I do not support this request to allow an amendment to our recently updated general plan to accommodate this extremely high density project. The steep site is not appropriate for the 92 cars that they've made spaces for on that site, and the 10 overly large multi-unit apartment buildings, which would generate an estimated in the developer's documents 266 more car trips per day coming through that intersection. You've probably read about that, but I'm just reminding you. A no vote to this request to amend the recently updated general plan and zoning designation does not mean that there will not be housing on that site. That is well thought out and designed to have fewer environmental and human impacts. The zoning and the general plan should not be changed. You are our representatives, and you are our allies. We are counting on you to hear us regarding the well-researched problems with this overbuilding on this sensitive site, culturally and environmentally. I don't feel that we've been heard, except when you came out. Thank you. This does not have to be a choice between 40 units or multi-million-dollar McMansions, as the developer and his associates would like us to believe. We should leave the zoning and general plan as is and be creative and compromising to build suitable, smaller, more affordable housing on that site. It can be done. We don't have to have McMansions.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, thank you for your time. I am Cannon Western, and I live on Ocean Street Extension. And we of Ocean Street Extension Neighborhood Association appreciate the work you do for the public, and we know it is not an easy task, but many of our questions have not been answered. Why is that? We as a community have tried to the best of our ability to be informed about this proposed development. We have done our best to be responsible citizens, but there is too much missing information and contradictions for this project to be approved tonight in its current form. Before you approve this, we need the following information. These questions need to be answered. 1, does the community meeting 8 years after project application with 2 days notice comply with city meeting and noticing requirements? 2, are the travel lanes really each 10 feet for the entire length of the reconstructed southern end of Ocean Street Extension? 3, will there be a sharrow for bikes on Ocean Street Extension or not? 4, where is Anya's Top's drainage review? How do we know the current system has been reviewed since her review cannot be found? 5, does the new sidewalk connect to the existing sidewalk? The staff report to the Planning Commission indicates it does not. 6, has safe overflow been provided for the downstream drainage system? 7, will the reconstruction of Ocean Extension and Graham Hill intersection be functional and safe? Please require that our questions be answered. Please vote no tonight to this development as proposed. And one other mention, someone spoke about dead end at the end of our street, which is the Paradise Park. When that Highway 9 was closed, and all of the residents of that park had to come out of the street. So there are conditions going on in our county now.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you all for your time and effort. My name is Judy Rose. I'd like to offer an alternative vision of how this property could be used. Envision, if you will, 9 houses, not McMansions, with 9 ADUs over the garages. Houses not facing the cemetery, but facing into the center of the property where there's open space with benches and trees, a place to gather, perhaps even a vegetable and flower garden. A place that fosters a sense of community, a community that helps and watches over one another, much like the rest of Ocean Street Extension does. A place that can be built according to our general plan with no zoning change, no exceptions, no need to radically excavate into a hillside or create major drainage issues onto Ocean Street Extension or further complicate the already dangerous and challenging traffic coming and going on Graham Hill Road. Imagine that this housing is reasonably priced and the ADUs could be affordable to teachers, nurses, the folks that work at Bookshop, and others who keep this town vital for us all. There's no good reason to do otherwise. The vision I just described is not only more compatible with the neighborhood, it has the potential to provide more affordable housing than the project proposed. It could provide 10 affordable houses, 1 inclusionary house, and 9 ADUs, versus the 7 that we get with the project. In addition, this alternative would eliminate or reduce all of the environmental impacts associated with this project. Think about it. You have a chance to create and revive our community. Just say no to this project as it now stands, and yes to the right type of housing in the right place.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Next speaker. Thanks.
Good evening. Lee Once. 30 years ago, my husband and I built a new home in Paradise Park. At that time, we had to sign an agreement that no one would ever live in our garage. We did not want extra people in Santa Cruz. So here we are without housing. But living in Paradise Park is no longer quite the paradise because of the congestion of traffic. Costco guaranteed us there would be no challenge, but try to get out on Highway 9 about 2:30 in the afternoon. We used to ride our bikes out the back gate that is Ocean Street Extension. There's no place to go after this cemetery that's really safe. And the access, that is a single lane road that holds 1 car. So you're looking at quality of life here, and I assume you make general plans and zoning plans to create habitable neighborhoods. And with the congestion of coming off of Ocean Street past Denny's to turn to get to Highway 9. Middle of the day, I go to 24-hour gym. That used to take one street light to make the left-hand turn there. Many times I sit with 3 or 4 light changes before I can make that left turn now. So I guess I'm just saying water, traffic, money, pause, look at your plans. Don't make the mistake of limiting the housing development that as we did 30 years ago. Look at the quality of life, and maybe the vote doesn't have to take place tonight with the input of this concerned group of individuals.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. And before you begin, are there any members of the public that are seated that still wish to speak? Okay. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. I've lived in Santa Cruz for about 50 years, and I've lived on Ocean Street Extension for almost 30 years. At 2005 Ocean Street Extension, I am Linda Berman Hall. Happy to be here tonight. I want to focus on gridlock and dangerous traffic all around the Ocean Street Extension site of this proposed development. I want to say that I have noticed over the years the cars that have barreled down Graham Hill and failed to stop, plunged into the cemetery wall and knocked down gravestones. And it's been more than once, quite a few times. And I noticed that I think the Band-Aid fixes that are proposed will not fully be able to remedy that dangerous traffic situation. I also note that our street, Ocean Street Extension, is the emergency exit for Paradise Park, which has been used more than once in those 30 years, and it will need to be again. And when it is going to be the exit, the evacuation route, and flooding may occur or other emergencies, it will be very difficult for the cars to get out with this coming at the entrance, this amount of additional cars and traffic. The problem of 1 South, Highway 1 South, is well documented as a problem. I think the Band-Aid fix is not going to ever be able to fix that well-known problem. In summary, I think that the housing crisis cannot be really fixed when you have all bad roads, coincidentally all around this wonderful property. So please reconsider.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Mike Schmidt. I lived in Santa Cruz for over 40 years now. I'd like to talk about the project. I'm in favor of the project, and I'd like to define a little bit more about the need, the applicants' reputations, and the economic opportunities of the project. In reviewing the city documents, the 2015 through 2013 housing element, it appears between 2000 and 2014, we constructed a whole 470 multifamily units in Santa Cruz. Meanwhile, the university grew by 7,000, and that doesn't account faculty or staff. When I speak about the reputation of the units, I speak from firsthand knowledge, reputation of the applicants. I work for one of their properties here in Santa Cruz, a 31-year-old property on Frederick Street. I'm always pleased because when I show the units, I hear comments such as, "These are so well maintained." You mean these buildings are 31 years old? I really like the layouts. The owners care about their properties. They take care of it. This past summer, we just finished rebuilding 5 of our decks and refinishing or replacing 71 of our railings for the 9 buildings on our property, which, by the way, have 5 affordable units, and they've been a member of the affordable housing projects for 31 years. They also helped draft the residential rental inspection program. As a former CEO of the Chamber of Commerce from 1999 to 2004, and a member of the Gang of 36 Vision Santa Cruz, I always look at these projects from 3 perspectives. Do we have a need? We certainly have defined that. The project itself, you can argue about that all evening long, and the economic impacts. I will tell you for the units, the 36 units we have on Frederick Street, we use 26 local businesses Coast Appliance, Coast Lock and Safe, Santa Cruz Fire Equipment, Ed Bogner Mechanical, Coast Evergreen Landscaping Services, Performance Planning, Kastner Extermination, Alberts Plumbing, just to name a few. So I believe that we have a need that we need to fill, and this project will help address that. I also believe that we have a good reputation from the local developers, been here for 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Somebody missing. Hi, I'm Mark Messiti-Miller, professional engineer and member of your planning commission. I've heard some people say this is a great project, but it is just too big. Before you jump to that same conclusion, let's look at some facts. From the chart in the EIR I passed around comparing the proposed project to the alternatives, we can see the proposed 40-unit project has a total footprint of 25,900 square feet. Wait, some say 40 units is too big. Let's make it smaller and reduce the project to 19 units, 19 single-family residences instead of these 40 condominiums. From the chart in the EIR, we can see that a 19-unit project has a footprint of 38,500 square feet, a footprint 12,600 square feet bigger than the 40-unit project. That doesn't make sense. The smaller project is actually bigger. How can that be? That is the beauty of smaller by design. Here is how it works. The units in the proposed bigger 40-unit project average about 1,000 square feet. The units in the smaller 19-unit project are on average bigger, 2,000 to 2,500 square feet or more, and they cover more land area because they will come with 2-car garages, etc. The lesson here is each of the units in the 19-unit project will take up more than twice as much space as each of the units in the 40-unit project. So right about now, you're probably scratching your head, but it doesn't stop there. It actually gets better. The bigger 40-unit project is actually more affordable because it is using the principle of affordable by design. Each of the 1,000 square foot units might sell for about $550,000, but each of the bigger single-family residences will probably sell for about $850,000 or more. Lastly, and here's the real kicker, the 40-unit project will produce at least 6 deed-restricted affordable units, but the 19-unit project will produce only 3. Those extra 3 deed-restricted affordable units, those are the ones the community needs the most.
That's it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Next speaker.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Novak. I've lived here in Santa Cruz for 6 years. I live down on normal Ocean Street, the non-extension part. I've seen how bad the traffic gets backed up coming in and out of town. And I work for the university. And I got an email a couple weeks ago from the university asking me if I could maybe house in my 1-bedroom, 2 total room apartment that I already share with my partner, a student, because they don't have anywhere to put them. We need more housing. We can't compare this project to alternatives that house fewer people. For every person not housed in the 40-unit project, not housed in the 19-unit project that would have been housed in the 40-unit project, they're not gone. They're somewhere. Maybe they're in the 3rd person in a bedroom in a single-family home, never designed for that. Maybe they're living out of their car, but they're somewhere. They're not gone. I challenge anyone who opposes this project to tell me where they would house the people that wouldn't be housed here.
Okay, pause, please. I need you guys to just keep it down like we said at the beginning. Please let each speaker have their opportunity. Be respectful of everyone. I didn't see who said that, but I respectfully let everybody have their opportunity. Thanks. Okay.
I've also looked over the plans for the housing. This doesn't look like luxury housing to me. This looks like ordinary, standard housing, the kind of housing that every adult in Santa Cruz deserves. If we can't build this and have it sell at an affordable rate, that's on us for not building enough housing. If we can't build it and sell it at an affordable rate because people from San Jose are coming in and snapping up all the supply, that is again on us for not preventing that from happening. We're going to need to build some more infrastructure, put in some traffic lights, make sure the sidewalks all hook up. That's why we have a city. That's the city's job. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Council, thank you for listening to all of us tonight. My name is Michael Nussbaum. I live on Crossing Street, down slope, and around the corner from the proposed development. I'm a bike commuter. Every morning I bike past the site of the proposed development, past the trees that we failed to save that flank the entrance to the cemetery, and I think that was a big omission in us as a community for not saving those trees. And I bike through the intersection between Ocean Street Extension and Graham Hill Road, which today is dangerous and scary. The changes that are proposed to that intersection will make it even worse. The changes that are proposed are going to decrease the radius of curvature around there. Cars that are already going quite close to the edge are going to go even further. And I think it's on us if we allow this to happen. There are city, county, and state studies that all agree that Santa Cruz is one of the highest communities in the state in terms of bicycle deaths and accidents. And the town of Santa Cruz, the city of Santa Cruz, has stated that they want to look into it and try to make it a more friendly community for bicycles. I do not see that there is anything about the proposed development at this point that is going to do anything positive for bicycle transportation, and I think it's only going to make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Jamili Cannon. I am an architect in town, a business owner, a board member of the local YIMBY chapter. I'm also a renter, and I, like many people in this room, want to be lucky enough to grow old here. The creation of 10 multi-million-dollar homes won't house this community or care for this community in the way that we truly need. That kind of development fails miserably at housing a broad range of people who need homes. The proposed plan of 40 units is a drop in the bucket relative to the dire need for housing that we are facing, but it is a drop in the bucket no less. This project provides homes for people who will not be able to survive here much longer if we sit by and do nothing. Affordable or market rate, more housing is the only way to make Santa Cruz a truly viable place to live. It is a basic law of supply and demand. Many of the people who have spoken tonight are residents of the county, not the city. If you were hearing from other city residents this evening, you'd be hearing about how this project is appropriate here because it's not in their backyard, over near Arana Gulch, or near the Soquel corridor, or on the west side.
You're the developer's daughter.
Stop for a second.
I'm not
okay,
related
guys, please,
in any
ma'am,
way.
hold the plan. If anyone who spoke out there, that's your warning, okay? You have a warning. Next time, you need to leave, okay? Thank you. Please go ahead.
Not in my backyard means that Santa Cruz will eventually become an irrelevant retirement or vacation town. I do not envy your job tonight as city council members, but I do urge you to take an important step in providing more housing for our community. On behalf of myself and the Santa Cruz Yes in My Backyard chapter, we ask you to say yes to housing, yes to people, and yes to this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hey, my name's Tim Gordon. I just have a few questions actually to help maybe think about these topics in a little different way. First off, if you were offered a job where someone said, you're going to work for me for 11 years, you're going to pay me to work for me, and you're going to provide a public benefit that people are going to hate you for, how many people would take that job? Probably not many. These developers know what it takes to get affordable housing and housing in general, and they took that step and said they would do it. So to stop it at this point would be really sad. Second, traffic. Tell me where in Santa Cruz has no traffic at commute time? Nowhere. Everywhere is busy. Does that mean that housing is not as important as traffic because there's so much of it that now we can't provide housing? Housing is a basic human right, not to get somewhere in your car faster today than tomorrow. Lastly, if not here, where? Seabright, West Side? Who's going to say yes? Who's going to say, let's build this, let's get housing in our town. It's about our town, not just a neighborhood. I support this project, and I hope that you'll do the same.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, council members. My name is Adrienne Rowell, and I am the developer's daughter.
Okay. If you could just address us, please.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
My dad is one of the developers, but I think what I have to say is that's an irrelevant point. I aspire to own a home, and I would like to do that prior to my retirement. I would like to ask the council members to think about how old they were when they bought their first home in Santa Cruz and how much that home cost. And if you don't own a home, think about why that is. I'm 30, and buying a house is not something that's possible for me in my immediate future right now. The average price of a home in Santa Cruz is $900,000, $1 million. That's not something I can do right now. If these houses were to be sold, $400,000 to $600,000, yes, that's still expensive. But this is the Bay Area, and the Bay Area is expensive. And those prices are much more approachable than $1 million. The way you fix a demand problem is by increasing the supply. Santa Cruz has a demand problem, and I encourage you to vote yes and increase the supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I've lived in Santa Cruz for 55 years, and I would like to support this project. The developers have immense integrity. Their support of local business. I'm a business owner. I have employees that want to stay in this community. As Chris noted, he was concerned about the cost of a rent of this. 11 years from now, if this is still going to go on for this project, it's going to be more. Let's resolve this now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Council. My name is Boyd Brown. I'm representing COPA, which is Communities Organized for Relational Power and Action. I think you're familiar with it. And COPA's housing team is in unanimous support of this project. And having worked with that team, I can assure you that there are very few things that have unanimous support among it. But this project is one of them. On a personal level, I'm a citizen of Santa Cruz, resident of Santa Cruz City. And I live on the west side. And I would like to see more development there. So I'm not only in favor of this project, but I would like to see Delaware Avenue, more housing there. We just need it. It's simple. We need it. And I see this debate, in some ways people have commented about you all needing to have political courage in making this decision. And I see it, frankly, as an argument between property-rich, established, conservative element here, wanting to conserve everything in a past that just doesn't exist anymore, with taking progress steps, trying to make things better. And I get the impression the city council is trying to be progressive in its approach. And this project seems to me to be an effort in that direction. So I think you all, in part of your accountability to us as citizens of the city, need to think about, are you being a conservative approach here or a progressive approach here? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Dean Lundholm. You know, I was going to talk about the excellence of the project, and that's been done a lot, and the track record of the developers, which has been mentioned. I have attended dozens, many dozens, of neighborhood meetings in Santa Cruz County and Monterey County, and every time there are neighbors who say, we don't want this. There's only one exception, and that's St. Stephen's Senior Housing, because the neighbors were mainly in the cemetery. 20,000 people arrive from outside the city, coming to the city every day to work. And why is that? Because we have not built enough housing for our workers. And, of course, that's what causes the traffic, or a main contribution to the traffic. You don't build, you have people who commute. And consider, well, you've been asked to consider the alternative of 9 houses. I would just say, please approve this project.
Thank you. Next speaker, and before you begin, I made to ask for a show of hands of who is seated, who has not spoken, who wishes to speak. Is there anyone else? So everyone who's seated right now is already spoken. Okay, so this is the end of the line that's up there now. So great, thanks. Okay. Please go ahead.
I am Betsy Cameron. Measure H is our first great hope for affordable housing since the dissolution of the RDA. Will voters support Measure H if they believe that decision makers can't discern a good project from a bad one? This project is anachronistic. It belongs to another time period. In another city where they are serious about transit-oriented development and sustainability, a 40-unit gated condo project at the city's edge would never be built. But here it is, a condo project that more than quadruples the zone density where it's virtually impossible to survive without a car. The nearest grocery store is 1.4 miles away. The nearest park is 0.7 miles away. The nearest public elementary school, De La Viega, is 2.5 miles away. But it's not just distance, it's the quality of the walking and the biking environment. In order to go anywhere from the development, you would have to walk or bike through the most inhospitable and dangerous environment in the city. The confluence of two highways, 4 on and off ramps, multiple surface streets, and thousands of cars. No one in this room would send their kid to school on a bike through that mess. No one. So unlike the Soquel and Cayuga project you just approved, every trip to school, every forgotten gallon of milk, every trip to the post office or library, and every dinner out will be a car trip. This goes against all.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I am Ruth Pierce, and I live above on Graham Hill, and I commute Graham Hill regularly. I cannot walk down Graham Hill because there is no transportation. There is a bus stop there, but it would be life and limb if I tried to cross to get to the bus stop, assuming there would be a bus that would stop there to begin with. So I think this density, until you fix the traffic situation, trying to get to Graham Hill from Ocean, I have waited 4 lights and been beyond that left-hand turn lane, and not during rush hour, during a regular part of the day. I work from my home office, and I travel at odd times to go to the market or to do other errands, and there is gridlock often. And I think putting that many cars is just irresponsible and not planning at all. And I just echo all that everyone has said about the safety issues. It's a safety corridor for EMT. I hear the sirens go by my house all the time, and I have a substantial setback. I think sometimes I can't even get out of my driveway for 5 minutes or more. When the uphill lane's free, then the downhill lane is clogged. I have waited 15 to 20 minutes to get to the Ocean Street light from just the crest of Graham Hill Road. I think this is very irresponsible planning or lack thereof, and I think you should not approve this plan this evening.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Mayor, Council. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous. I've come here to listen and to learn and to see some of the issues coming at you, and you have a very difficult decision in front of you. And as I hear the concerns, I think you've heard many, and you hear them from different perspectives. I'm for this plan, and I'm not one for the thought of growth. But whenever I have a difficult decision to make, I usually check with my family. And the person in the family that resonates most with me at this point is my son. He's in college, he's not here, he's in another beautiful beach town, and I do hope that he can come back. But he says he won't. There's probably nothing here for them. We've had some well thought out projects by the builders I'm fully in support of what they do. Times when I check with him before decisions I make, and I think of this just as the young people who have come up have spoken favor. I want this town to go forward for them. When I complain constantly about traffic, as I do, I think it was my son who set me straight. He said, "Hey, Mom, you're not in traffic. You are traffic. Get used to it. It's never going back. This is my world, and it's going to move forward. It's going to move forward with or without you." So I hope you consider that and approve this project.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Annette Olson, and I've narrowed down my topic to the EIR. The draft EIR identified a significant traffic impact on the southbound Highway 1 off-ramp, and a mitigation was proposed, widening the off-ramp and a signal. The mitigation, however, was not designed, not funded, and not in the CIP. We pointed this out, and the traffic section was recirculated. What is significant here is that if we hadn't questioned the mitigation, it would have been before your council without an override. Your staff would have been asking you to certify an EIR with a mitigation that defies all professional standards for mitigations. But there's more. As a part of reviewing the recirculated and final EIR, I spoke and emailed with Caltrans staff who have said unequivocally, the ramp is too constrained for a signal. So now we know that the mitigation is not designed, not funded, not in the CIP, and not feasible, yet it is still in the EIR. In addition, as a part of a Public Records Act request, we have an email from one of the developers from a year ago to Chris Schneider and others saying, quote, Caltrans stated to me, and Chris agreed, that any potential improvement would not involve signalization. Here is an internal dialogue a year ago between staff and the developers where it's acknowledged that the mitigation is not going to be built, at the same time that there is an external presentation of the mitigation to the public and your council as being legitimate. That's a problem, and it is at odds with every principle of transparent public government. Given this, do not certify the EIR. It is fatally flawed. It puts the city in legal jeopardy and undermines the credibility of this process. Vote no. A final point. The developer's representative suggested that 4 accessible units were going to be included in this project, and I just wanted you to be aware that that is strictly what the code requires. They are doing no more. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. And before you begin, okay, there are no other speakers that are seated. You, I believe, are going to be the last speaker. Thank you. So you are the last speaker. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council and staff. I'm Kate Roberts, a resident of Santa Cruz City and the president of the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. I want to thank you for hearing this plethora of public insight and input. I think it's a really healthy dialogue, and I think it's really an awesome part of our democratic process. It's pretty cool. I've given you this in writing. I'm just really here to show personal support and representing MBEP for this project. As you know, we're very much in favor of it and have done a lot of advocacy on behalf of this project because I believe we do a lot of talking about the housing crisis and the need for housing, but so many times, time and time again across this region and across the state, good projects get shot down due to NIMBYs. If this, a well-planned, equitable, environmentally sound project from local developers that meets the housing element requirements and has handicapped designated units, that's something I learned tonight, can't get passed, then all this talk is just that. It's talk and no action. Talk with no action doesn't house our teachers. It doesn't house our veterans. It doesn't house our service workers, our clerks, our city employees. But action does. This project has broad support from across the political spectrum, market rate developers, nonprofit organizations, and many, many others who are working hard to get our community into safer, better housing closer to where they work. Please, please support this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Corey Ray. So I want to talk about the bigger picture in our community. As council members, you're charged with making difficult decisions, and Many voices and many stories, lots of stories. Tonight's no different. But I think tonight is about established Santa Cruz and the direction we're going. Established Santa Cruz is about people like me. We hit the generational jackpot, okay? I like that term. I heard it last week. We own homes and we're secure in our housing. We got here, we got ours. So let me tell you now about Santa Cruz. So this quote is current data. I received it yesterday. In the past, this is from the city schools. In the past 4 years, they've had 36 teachers leave because of the cost of living. 6 teachers declined job offers this year when they saw the cost of housing. So you just take that in, 36 teachers. These are people who had come to Santa Cruz to establish their life, and they could not stay. Maybe they were here to begin with. There are 36 households that they won't put down roots. They won't teach our children and our grandchildren. 36 classrooms and principals that had to start over. I suggest that this is a crisis, and it is our job as a community, with you as our leaders, to address this. I just want to clarify some statements that were made earlier. If these condos were to sell for $550,000, you might get first-time home buyer. Measure, what is that? H? Yes? Okay. So those would be affordable at 120% of AMI, just to be clear. So 40 households could live at 1930 Ocean Street Extension. They could live in new environmentally friendly homes. They could be teachers. They could help get a down payment. Or 9 households could live there. And I can't tell you about them, but I bet they won't be teachers. So help our community and say yes.
Thank you. Next
Thank
speaker,
you.
please.
My name is Yossi Almog, and I request you to stay with the vision that the people who created the general plan had, which is to create a walkable community, a community that is centered and does not sprawl. This project is part of a sprawl, just finding somewhere far from the center a parcel and trying to maximize the benefit from it. I am for housing, but the housing needs to be in a reasonable place where people have access to their needs. And that's along corridors where there is public transportation or places where people can bike or walk to their places. So I call you to have a vision how to develop the place and not run into random request of developer that found something that will tempt you and push your button for housing somewhere that is not suitable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, council persons. I'm Bob Morgan. I live in Paradise Park Development. I'd like to try and dispel the idea that was advanced earlier that Ocean Street Extension is a dead-end road, and thus that the congestion problems that have not been dealt with are relatively unimportant. That is not the case. Paradise Park is divided by a covered bridge that has a traffic limit of 5 tons. And it is routinely used by fire trucks, garbage trucks, delivery trucks, every vehicle in excess of 5 tons that comes into Paradise Park on the Ocean Street Extension side must come in through Ocean Street Extension. There is no alternative there. Secondly, in importance, the State Fire Code requires that developments the size of Paradise Park have 2 means of egress. Paradise Park is reliant upon Ocean Street Extension for their second means of egress. There's nothing we can do about that. But it does point out the necessity of giving serious consideration to the importance of traffic and resolving the traffic issues before you approve this particular project. Ocean Street extension from this proposed project on into Paradise Park is extremely narrow and hazardous to emergency vehicles. I've got a picture of a fire truck and a passenger car nose to nose in a storm, neither able to pass the other. A propane tank had blown and had to be dealt with and could not get through. Sorry for the elapsed time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Jessica, you are our last public speaker on this.
Hi there. A clarification, Corey Ray, the last woman who spoke, is Craig Wells' wife and a co-owner of this parcel. My name is Jessica Parr, and when I met with Lee Butler about this development, I pointed out that this parcel is not in the core, that it's on a very rural street on the very edge of the city. And he responded that he believed that every parcel in the city limits is infill. Given that the general plan defines infill very differently, I have a question for you tonight. Do you believe that this parcel is infill? And if this is the case, will you develop everywhere in Santa Cruz in this fashion? If you believe that this is infill, then the City Council should get straight with the citizens of Santa Cruz. Get clear with us that no neighborhood is safe from density, and get ready to deal with the political consequences of your action. Because we all thought we had a deal. We thought that Santa Cruz was going to develop more housing in the urban core, and we thought that the general plan mattered. This is a democracy, and you, as our elected representatives, will decide what happens to this proposal. On the one hand, you have developers who are asking to put in 40 units, and on the other hand, you have hundreds of citizens who are concerned about the lack of affordable units, a dangerous and failed intersection, building into a 30-degree slope under a major road, emergency access, and the dire impact on a 160-year-old Santa Cruz business where people go to bury, mourn, and remember their dead. I was raised a small D Democrat, and from my experience, the best leaders are ones that can take people from very polarized points of view and bring them together. The citizens of Santa Cruz are not against all development on the site, but we've never been given consideration by the planning department to be part of the process that decides what is acceptable and appropriate here. I'm asking you as the representatives accountable to the city of Santa Cruz to do the hard work of bringing people together to come up with a solution that creates more housing for the city and designs with the cemetery and the community in mind. And that means that you vote no tonight and direct the planning department to come back with a compromise and a plan that works for everyone.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So we got through that two and a half hours later, and now it's up to us. We're going to be bringing it back to the council to have some deliberations. There were some questions that were posed during the public comment period, and I'd just like to use this as an opportunity to kind of address those before we get into the discussion. First of all, I know that the comment came about correspondence that was received in advance of the meeting. There was one correspondence from Bill Parkin representing the association, and I'm wondering if you, someone in planning, if there was an opportunity to review it in advance of the meeting. If there's any comment.
Afternoon, Mayor, or evening now, Mayor and Council. Yes, we have reviewed the information provided by Bill Parkin. We have also consulted with our CEQA consultants on that, and also our outside attorneys, and we believe that the CEQA is solid, that it has been completed in compliance with the requirements of CEQA, and that it represents the city's independent judgment.
Thank you. Please.
I'll just add that some of the modifications that were provided to you this evening were also a result of the review of that correspondence.
Okay, thank you. There was also a series of 7 questions that were submitted just now by a resident in the area. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at those during the public comment period, if you have any responses at this time. First one was the community meeting. Did it meet city meeting and noticing requirements?
I'll speak to that one. So we did hold a community meeting for this. At the meeting, there was public criticism about the timing of the notification of that, and we agree. The timing of the notification was not as it should be, and the developer provided that notification. We did have 45 attendees at that meeting, so it was a good turnout. But I'm not going to defend the notice if I know when I received the notice and it was a few days in advance. And so that is not what we have in our policy. However, that policy had not been adopted at that time. So there was no policy at that time, and the developers did provide a notice, but in my opinion, it should have been longer. Fortunately, we did still have a good turnout with 45 individuals that I counted.
Okay, I don't know if you want to go through the questions or you want to call them out, which ones you know.
I don't have the questions in front of me. In fact, I handed them off to our Public Works Assistant Director, who might be able to answer a few of them.
Okay.
Mayor, council members, Chris Schneider, Assistant Director of Public Works, City Engineer. Question number 2, are the travel lanes really each 10 feet for the entire length of the reconstructed southern end of Ocean Street extension? Based on the site map, it goes past the driveway to the project, essentially where the bioswale area is. It doesn't go all the way along the whole site. That would require removing additional trees and, constructing retaining walls, et cetera. So it is narrower past, as you get past the driveway to the cemetery, it starts to drop off and go down into the drainage area. If you were to put 20 feet there, then there would be some environmental issues associated with that. But it does address the driveway both to the project and to the cemetery with 20 feet, 2 10-foot lanes.
Number 3.
Will there be a share for bikes on Ocean Street extension? Yes, there will be. Where is Agnes Tope's drainage review? Agnes Tope was our stormwater quality environmental reviewer for the project. She's moved on to a different project, unfortunately, and to Carmel. We've replaced her position. We've reviewed the site. Our engineering staff also reviews the drainage plan. It does meet our requirements. I think the biggest issue at the Planning Commission, issues at the Planning Commission where the bioswale does not drain the site. It drains the street. So it provides water quality improvements for the street, not for the project. And that's the purpose of the bioswale. There are common design features now on roadways. You can see them other locations. We have some in the city of Santa Cruz in the county. One place I could say, SoCal and 17th, there's a bioswale there. People don't really notice it. It's a narrow ditch that's behind curbs that allows drainage from the street to enter and filter before it goes into the storm drain system. The site currently has its own bio-retention and detention, and it's designed to control the runoff from the site to pre-development conditions. It also has water quality improvements as required with new stormwater quality standards. There is a storm drain at the base of the project which takes the drainage from the site as well as from the bioswale down to the drainage ditches that are along and to Crossing Street. One of the issues that came up was the comment about the 100-year flood and whether streets are supposed to be designed for 100-year. The San Lorenzo River is designed for the 100-year storm, not our city streets. Designing city streets for a 100-year storm would require that we build walls along all our streets and block driveways in order for the water to be able to pass through a city street. It's infeasible and impractical, and it's not likely to happen anywhere that I'm aware of. Does the new sidewalk connect to the existing sidewalk? Yes, it does. It is contiguous from the portion that's going to be constructed around to the existing sidewalk that's currently on Ocean Street. There is one area that the site map's been changed, which allows for the handicap ramp from the development to cross the bioswale over to the other to the new sidewalk. The safe overflow been provided for the downstream drainage system. There are improvements to the storm drain system and fixing some of the erosion that's occurred on the site. Will the construction of Ocean Street Extension and Graham Hill intersection be functional and safe? Do we know this for sure? Will a truck turning left onto Ocean Street Extension from Graham Hill obstruct drivers heading south? The current design has been reviewed, was completed by a concept was developed by a traffic engineer. It's been reviewed by staff. It does upgrade the intersection. We believe it will be safer. Will it be safe? It'll be safer. The striping is enhanced. The medians, the striped medians are larger. There's none currently out there, so it provides for, dividing the opposing traffic. The left turn lane is going to be larger than it currently is, so it provides for more stacking. The medians are going to be designed to allow for adequate lane widths. There's going to be better street lighting at that location, which will make it safer. There's going to be a radar warning activated sign above the project as you come down Graham Hill. There's better edge line, reflectors on the street, signage, vegetation removal, and some has already occurred so that it's easier to look up the hill at traffic coming down Graham Hill. Is it the perfect intersection? No, it's not, but it is going to be better with these improvements. I believe it's going to be safer. The traffic engineer that did the traffic study for the project also did an extensive review of reported collisions at the intersection, and there were 17 over 14 years, which is about 1.2 per year. Now, the comments from the neighbors are there are some that are not reported. Yes, there are, but we don't know what those are. The collisions don't show any particular cause of accident. Some of it is from coming down the hill. Some of it is darkness. There's a variety of issues. Some of those will help with the improvements that are occurring here. But 1.2 year is not a high number of collisions. There was one comment about the intersection about the radius of curvature. There may be a minor change to the radius of curvature, but that's really inconsequential to what's shown on the design.
Thank you, Chris, for the review and responses. I did have one question because I know this is adjacent to the county area. Are there projects that we've had in the past where there's been maybe joint funding for intersection improvements where we look at like the circulation in relation to both the county to help fund these? Or are there, where they're looking at something that borders on, two different jurisdictions like this?
Well, generally, they have the opportunity to review. I haven't been in any discussions with the county with this project in particular. We have worked on some joint projects like the Murray Street Bridge. We're working with them, primarily with the Sanitation District, the Segment 8 and 9 Rail Trail application, which covers both city and county of Santa Cruz. So there are from time to time that. We work more closely with them on wastewater treatment because the city has a regional wastewater treatment facility and it treats, wastewater from the county as well.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions that came up that you want to have addressed? Councilmember Chase, did you have something?
I thought I did, but I can't find it, so I know others have questions. I have a lot of paper in front of me.
Was there a question on this side first? Okay.
Chris answered a lot of the questions.
Okay, on this side, Councilmember Crone.
Just to clarify, the 4 accessible units, the 4 accessible handicap units, is that what is required in the project?
We were actually just discussing that. We're wondering if that's a building code requirement that they have to have before accessible. And
We don't know that. I mean, we don't know that.
We can ask the architect. Yeah, and see.
Good evening, council members. Dennis Diego. The answer to that question is it's required by code, and we recently had our CASP consultant review the project because when we originally designed it, we were under the 2010 code, and there's been 3 code cycles, and it still complies with the requirement of the percentage of affordable, and it's also a housing law that requires the percentage be provided. And we took advantage of that area of the site, which is the flattest, and that's why those units are in the front. And you can see from the path of travel diagram that they are aligned.
Thank you.
Along that topography.
I still haven't heard how much the market rate units are going to go for. Somebody said 2,800, but seeing what 2 bedrooms are going for right now in Santa Cruz, I think it's closer to 3,800. And maybe by the time, does anybody have a sense of how much this is going to?
I don't recall, but I thought that was answered. I don't know.
Not the market rate. The
rate.
Affordable units were 2,000.
I don't know if did the applicant wishes to answer that, if they have an idea at this time. Just at the mic, sir.
Yeah, my name is Craig Rowell. This is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit. We've been at this. We started this the last public hearing was 8 years ago. We think that the market rate units are in the $2,500 to $2,600 a month. That's barring a CEQA lawsuit on this project. So there's really no way of projecting what the market rents. The market rents actually are created by the market. In other words, if we have another recession, we have other units that, we lower the rents. I mean, that's what we do. The object is to keep your apartments full. So if there's a recession, the rents will go down, whether or not, we like that or not. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I know that 2 bedrooms right now are going for, between 3,000 and 3,800.
We don't anticipate that, but I mean, there's no promises because we don't know when we can build this or, how much it's going to cost to build it.
Yeah, thank you. What about Bob Odermatt's concerns? Did that run across your radar screen?
Yeah, those comments were made early in the project in 2010, before actually I was with the city of Santa Cruz. And my understanding is I included those just because they were comments that were brought before the Planning Commission early on in 2010. The applicant has addressed many of those comments, as well as I've included those conditions of approval to address those comments with the conditions of approval for the project. So a lot of them have to do with the design of the building. And I don't recall exactly the number, the condition approval number, but we go over all of those and make sure that all those are addressed as part of the building permit submittal.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Matthews, do you have any questions? Councilmember Chase? Okay, I thought you had one. Councilmember Brown? Councilmember Ryan? Okay, Vice Mayor Watkins?
I don't have any questions, but I'm happy to share or sort of kick off the conversation if that's appropriate. I just want to first start by saying thank you all for being here this evening. I recognize that there is a lot of emotion and passion around this item tonight, and it's been a long history and I recognize that, and I also want to thank the staff for their work as well. And I had the opportunity to go and visit Ocean Street Extension a couple of times now, and it's beautiful. It's an incredible street, and I really just have so much recognition for the neighbors in that, recognizing how incredible they have in terms of this little jewel here in Santa Cruz. And I also had an opportunity to talk to those that are interested in supporting more housing, and I genuinely recognize their interest and their value to design and create opportunities for more housing that is a diversity of housing opportunities in our city. And I think that's very genuine as well. And I think what we have before us tonight is a bit of a crossroads, and it sort of is a symptom of Santa Cruz, really. And I feel that it's a really unique time in Santa Cruz, and I think you all recognize that. it's shocking to know that we are internationally compared to some of the largest cities in terms of affordability. That's powerful, and that's a place in a kind of a higher scaling that we don't really want to be on, right? And I appreciate this beautiful city and this beautiful town and growing up here, and I am concerned about what it can be if we don't have our teachers or our nurses or we don't have our workforce. And I know because of some of the folks in education, we are losing our families. We are struggling to retain working people, and that's scary, and that's not the Santa Cruz that. I want to be, and it's not the Santa Cruz I think that my kids will have an opportunity to thrive in, as I know many of you fear the same. I really want to kind of get a sense of where the council is, and I'll just sort of put out where I am. I think that our role as a governing body is to find opportunity for compromise. And I think that we can find common ground in the absence of perfect. We can seek some sort of progress in the motion of an intentionality of action. That's something I hope to speak about in my next term as mayor. That's truly our responsibility in democracy. And I hope to have a good conversation with you all about what that could look like. I think we have a sort of a stark difference between 9 to 40. And I'm interested in seeing where the council is and looking at some of the alternatives. And I appreciate that the staff provided us with those. So that's sort of where I'm at in terms of seeking an option and seeking an alternative. For the interest of discussion, I'm happy to sort of put a motion on the table. I'll move that we look at accepting the option of 32 units. That could be a conversation that we discuss in terms of how many that looks like to start off kind of the conversation. So I'll move that we accept the EIR and look at option 3, a reduced size to 32 units.
I'll second that.
Before we have any discussion about that, I'd like to ask for the opportunity for the developer to come up and speak to that issue as well, just in terms of the suggestion for the reduction in size.
Let me put it this way.
You can speak into the mic, please.
Yeah. Okay, Craig Rowell again. We've been at this for an awful long time. We're not going to get rich doing this. If you throw away 8 units, you lose opportunities for people to live. We would accept your compromise because we don't really feel like we have any alternatives. Although I would just remind you that we've had a number of letters from attorneys, et cetera, who have expressed their interest in suing us over this draft EIR, over the EIR, and it would be called a sequel lawsuit, and it could delay this for another 3 years. So I would just ask you to, I again would say that we will accept that, but I would ask you to reconsider the 40 units because I think it's really valuable, and it will be even more valuable by the time we get this approved. I also have just one other thing that I would like to just say is that we would like to work with the public works staff is on, I think it's, I'm not sure of the condition, I don't know, the condition regarding Ocean Street extension, and we'd like to do work on, providing the parking, doing what we can to eliminate the bioswale. In other words, we recognize the lead difficulties, but if you would just to condition us to work with staff to try to maintain the rural nature of Ocean Street extension and with safety in mind, we'd appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, I was wondering if a representative from the neighborhood could also speak to the 32 units that you just allowed the developer to talk about.
Sure, I'll if Jessica, if you want to come up and speak to that.
Oh, good. Yes, sure. Why not? Hi. So, like I said, I think a compromise is reasonable. A lot of people here spoke to affordability tonight, and I would imagine that the council could consider a motion, or sorry, a amendment to that motion to make sure that affordability is still a large portion of this project. I mean, that seemed to be a huge echoing in what the public was saying, both people from the neighborhood and everywhere. So I think that, as somebody spoke to earlier, allowing this parcel to be anything more than 9 units is already a windfall for the developer, and I think that some of that should be retained in affordable housing.
All right, thank you. Okay, so thank you. I just want to have that opportunity to have that discussion, and I think that we'll have a motion on the floor and a second, and let's have some discussion. Councilmember Brown.
Well, I first want to say that I really do appreciate all of the time and effort that's gone into trying to craft a project that does get us to a significant number of units and affordable, somewhat affordable units. I'm going to speak to that in a moment. Or my perspective on that. I also want to thank everybody who's come out, people who have been engaged in the conversation. Some of you feel that you have not been invited to the table in a meaningful way, and I hope that that is possible in the future. I agree with Vice Mayor Watkins' point that our role as a governing body is to try to work through to some kind of compromise. And while that may be frustrating to those who have put a lot of time and effort into bringing these plans before us, I just want to say, earlier today we made a decision, and a few weeks back we made a decision to allow that essentially allows what is likely to be a 3-year, potentially longer wait to develop or redevelop a blighted property at 350 Ocean Street. We thought nothing of that. But to say that waiting for 3 more years here is just ridiculous, that just doesn't match up to me. So I do think that we ought to be cognizant of how we make those decisions and what criteria we base those on. With respect to the question of affordability, I just did a back of the envelope calculation on an affordable 1-bedroom unit. If we use the inclusionary guidelines that we adopted earlier today, again, back of the envelope, it would, 3 City of Santa Cruz Parks and Rec workers, or 2.75 workers, would have to, it would take their full-time, 40-hour-a-week jobs to be able to affordably live in an affordable 1-bedroom. 3 entry-level Safeway workers to affordably live in an affordable 1-bedroom. So you can question those numbers. I'm questioning a lot of numbers that have been thrown out tonight. I think we all have the right to do that, but that's my back-of-the-envelope calculation. I don't consider that affordable. Mr. Krausow and others asked us to consider what we give up when we make these kinds of decisions. And in this case, I don't believe that giving up one of the last, low density, agricultural, there's a lot of agricultural land out there. It is in close proximity to a place, spiritual site for many people, not just within the city of Santa Cruz, but beyond. And those people have a right to have a voice in this too. Families of loved ones who their final resting days in close proximity. So I think what we give up on balance for what we are getting, if we were getting significantly affordable units in the project, and again, I do not mean to say that the developers are not trying to put together a project that is viable. I just don't see how that is affordable for the people that we say we care about and want to continue to be able to live in this community. So that said, I agree that we ought to be coming to some kind of, or trying to work through to some kind of compromise. My preference is that we direct staff to come back to us with some possibilities, and that we direct staff to bring the developer and the neighbors association organization together in a meaningful way to try to figure out what that compromise is. I don't feel that I'm qualified to make those kinds of decisions and throw out numbers that I appreciate that the alternatives were included in the environmental impact report, but, again, we've had differences in perspective on what exactly we get, the total square footage, et cetera. I don't feel qualified to, on the spot, make those kinds of decisions. I think the community and the developers should get together in a meaningful conversation and come back to us with the help of staff with a compromise that might work for everybody.
Thanks. So, any other comments? I'll make a quick comment just on that because you were talking about engagement. One of the things thinking about reducing the size is like how you go through a process to determine where those units are removed. And one of the things I'd like to see is if we do look at this as landing on 32 that we talk about the removal of either 2 buildings or otherwise removing the 8 units and having some sort of process that we look at so that it does include some direction to the planning to coordinate with the developers and have some public input on terms of which of the units would be removed. And so I would like to see some sort of condition along those lines so that there's some clear direction on which of the buildings are removed or which units before the building permits are submitted, and then having some sort of neighborhood meeting that would be done so that they have some process to show that those units are removed from a particular place, and it's clear that they've engaged with the community so that we can kind of reduce some of the impacts that were discussed during today and through some of the correspondence. And then also in regards to the affordability, making sure I wanted to ask for the 32 units that just came up, how many of those would be units sold would be inclusionary? That'd be 5 on site. Is that correct?
5.
Yes,
5.
I believe it's 5.
And if the map, the units in the rented, it's 12.5? Right?
Right.
The units shall be inclusionary?
Talk it out.
So it would depend on the affordability percentages that the council sets. From the for sale perspective, the council cannot go below 15%. That's what's required in the ordinance. So at 32 units, they would have 4.8 units, which would round up to 5 that they would be required to provide if council was designating a 15% requirement. Same would be the case if they were doing rentals. With the rentals, again, there is a 0 requirement now, and the condition of approval had 15%. So that would be 4.8 at just as a reference point. With 32 units and 17.5%, which is what we were looking at before. That still is 5 units, except that actually is 5.6. According to the current code, that would round down and they would provide 5 on site. They could provide 6, but they would likely provide 5 on site and pay in lieu fees for the 0.6. Again, that is for the for sale portion.
David,
May I have one question for the mapped units, the rental?
For the mapped, that's up to the council in terms of the level that they would choose. But if you did 15%, then that would be 5. Again, 4.8, and that would round up to 5 if it were rentals.
On the ADAs, how many ADAs would still be or handicap accessible?
I would defer to the architect for that.
If
question.
we go down to 32.
10%. So
we would lose
3.
We would lose accessible going down to 32.
Right.
One accessible. Okay.
Given the design of the project and depending on really, it heavily depends on which buildings are removed and which units are removed. They may be able to maintain that, but that would be a function of which buildings are ultimately removed should the council settle on 32.
Councilmember, did you have another question?
No, that.
Okay, Councilmember Matthews.
I actually think this is an appropriate project for this site. And as many people have said, Santa Cruz has gone through a lot of change. Many of the people who spoke referenced the fact that they've lived here for 30, 40, 50 years, as in fact have I. And the population of Santa Cruz has doubled in that time. I've seen plenty of change in my own neighborhood of multifamily homes, and not to state the obvious, we are dealing with a housing crisis that is absolutely unprecedented in our community. We will never build to meet the need. I think that's a fallacy. Certainly, affordability is relative. I believe that as well, but I think it's important to do what we can. And to my mind, the niche that really is very much needed is smaller units, both rental and affordable. And this, to me, it does meet the definition of infill. Anyone who has been here for 30, 40, or 50 years probably voted for some of those greenbelt parcels that we treasure, Pogonit, Moore Street, et cetera, Arana Gulch, and that was a bargain. A few people have mentioned that. We voted on that, noting that we were preserving a huge amount of green space and open space, and that the flip side of that was going to be greater density in our city. It's partly what we just voted for in our downtown, but I think we do have to look for opportunities where there are larger parcels that can accommodate multifamily, smaller units. And in fact, Ocean Street Extension is gorgeous. I went out there, I met with the neighbors, I met with Krasau's, and with the developers as well. It's a very unique site. And this particular parcel is between an RM district and a very rural area. So to my mind, the rezoning to RL is appropriate. I should also say the general plan is riddled with mutual inconsistencies, but part of what it calls for is adapting to change and meeting the housing needs of the community. So if the votes are there for 32, I will support that. I honestly could go higher than that because I think the benefits of meeting housing needs, of some improvements on what is a busy intersection will not materially, will improve that, and the 40 units will not materially change that. So those are my thoughts. I think the direction is right. I would be happy with more, but I don't see the support there for it.
Councilmember Noroyan, then Councilmember Chase, then Councilmember Noroyan.
Thank you. So I largely agree with the comments you made. I mean, basically, I spent a year meeting with people in the community about housing, all kinds of people. And when I think about the summary of what they said they needed, it is basically this project. And thankfully, Councilmember Crone asks that every time we have a project in front of us, how much is it going to cost? And so I've listened over the last 2 years for that and the 2 years prior. And this project is the most affordable project by unit we have had in front of us. So even if it still doesn't feel as affordable as we'd like it to be, it is absolutely the most affordable we have seen. And it is over $1,000 cheaper than the median rent right now for the affordable unit. So I just feel like we have to respond to what the community has said to us that they desperately need. This is the type of housing that we have seen in our housing element, that we've heard from people who are desperate to make their lives here, live here. And if we don't say yes to this, we have let our community down. So I will absolutely support this compromise. I also would have supported the 40. We have a responsibility to this community to provide the housing that they need, and this project does that.
Councilmember Noroyan.
I find it pretty interesting too with the 32 units that it's going to take up less impervious surfaces and compared to the 19 unit proposal, and actually doesn't take up much more. It takes up 2,000 more square feet with the 9 unit proposal, and that's really compelling to me that we would actually have less surface being built on by having more units. And you know, I also have had conversations with people, and this seems to fit a need within our town. And I have to tell you that when the Reedway cottages were built, that provided an opportunity for my family to be able to own a home Whereas before, there hadn't been that opportunity because the price point had come down far enough for us to be able to get into it. Was it low-income housing by any means? No. But it was stretched like crazy to get into, and now, we were able to, it was finally at age 40, I was able to own a home in the town that I grew up in. And so I can't help but think that if we don't approve the larger sized project here, that we are going to just keep doing what we've been doing, which is building single family homes, when we have reports that for over 40 years our needs have been smaller units, and we haven't fulfilled that need. And I do wish that the people who had come before me had planned this out a little bit better, because then maybe we wouldn't be talking about building 32 units in the spot that we're building. I'm more than willing to admit that this is not the most ideal location, but we're not in an ideal situation either. And so I think 32 is a good compromise. I think the fact that it takes less square footage is really important to note. And as much as I don't think this is the greatest location for it, I think it's housing that we need.
So at this point, I'd like to get the motion restated, just so we know where we are.
Sure. So essentially what the motion I made was to look at the alternative number 2, I think in the revisions. Is that what it is?
I believe it's 3.
I'm sorry, alternative number 3 of 32, moving it from 40 to 32, and to incorporate language as suggested in terms of the community outreach process.
Yes. So, and then, so I would say that by reducing these, you would have a design plan development permits would be approved with a condition that the removal take place through the removal of 2 buildings or through otherwise removing 8 units, and to work with the planning division to determine which of the buildings or units would be removed in advance of submitting the building permits. That?
Yeah.
And I'd like the planning department to coordinate with the developers and invite public input into which units are removed, so that there would be some sort of solicitation of the neighbors in regards to this, and hosting a neighborhood meeting, posting the information so that you can get feedback and discussion on which of those would be removed. And then the removal would be through the administrative approval, so that it would be something that by this direction it would be approved and at the direction of the planning director after that process.
David?
So that's what I'd ask that be included, the maker and the second of the motion.
So I'm under the impression that you have language there.
I do.
But there was a great deal of discussion around it. So that is, in your explanation of it, you amplified on it. So you have language there that we haven't seen. Maybe you could just, or Martine could read straight through that. Sure. You see where I'm going?
Motion.
Yeah.
Exactly. I just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah, and I did appreciate your clarifying, and maybe it is in the language, that there would be, subsequent to this action, a meeting with residents, other interested people, to discuss the realignment, but that would be input, and the decision would be at the departmental level. Is that correct?
Direction of the planning, approval of planning director.
Yeah. And if I could just, I assume your motion also includes all the other things, adopt certifying the final EIR, all these other.
Could I just interject a comment? Insofar as the resolution to approve the project makes findings in support of a 40-unit project, I would request that the council also direct the staff to modify the findings to support a 32-unit project, which the information is contained in the staff report of the record, and so that could be incorporated into your motion.
I will incorporate that into my motion.
Modify the resolution and any other places adjusting 40 to 32.
Do you want to, I mean, I made comments, if you want to read through that as your motion, whatever, in terms of the direction.
Okay. So the direction is to accept the EIR, to shift from 40 to 32 units, and to make those modifications in any resolutions or otherwise, and to incorporate outreach process through our planning director and planning department and the developers, and have adequate, and I think you kind of listed all the ways that we would engage with the community in terms of feedback. And then if you would state how you anticipated it going back in terms of the approval of the permits.
Well, the units could be removed by administrative approval with no appeal procedure and at the discretion of the planning director.
And I accept that. That makes sense. Yeah, no, yeah, sure.
Okay. So is that accepted? Second? Okay. Councilmember Crone.
Yeah, if you could put up those slides, Bonnie. I see which way this is going, but I'll make one last plea. If you ever wonder what council members do on their dinner breaks, Councilmember Brown and I took a little field trip. Can you put those up, Bonnie? Or there's a few slides that just wanted to show. Really, the slides are centering on the transition from, there's a few slides here about the neighborhood as you're traveling along Graham Hill Road. And if you just keep going, you can see that there's, the neighborhoods are, we parked here and walked a couple blocks to Ocean Street Extension. And this is very different than when you get to this. If you hold there for a second, you get to this intersection. It took us quite a bit of time to cross the street just on this, crossing Graham Hill Road from the other side. So you saw where the density was, and there's then this amazing sort of transition to rural. And I've had dozens of students who have worked on the farms down here. Route 1 has place, as do a couple other places, Yellow Wall. So if you could go to the next slide. And so you can see this, this is not what was across the street. This is not the same area. And this is, the chapel, the back of the chapel, and part of, the beginning of the property. If you go to the next slide. And this was something that was, really disturbing to us too, that how close this is going to be. And I really don't know if this, limiting noise is going to, when you get 3 or 4, or actually you'll get 5 to 7, as one of the people at the podium said, UCSC students in one of these 2-bedroom apartments that could be overlooking this chapel. And as was pointed out before, and someone sent pictures around, there were a couple hundred people there mourning the death of one of their spiritual leaders. And we saw this. If you go to the next slide, and it's just kind of amazing, this property and the differences from that density that you had across the street, and you come over here. I don't know if there's one more slide. This is greeted off the freeway. I heard what Mr. Aldridge said, and I would just, his, closing your eyes and thinking about these places, like Lighthouse Field and Pogonip and Ocean Street Extension. I would say, we've also have the Great Meadow at UCSC is being battled over right now, and we have the Moore Creek Uplands, and we have Golf Club Drive. That's the next big battle, and I just want to put this out there that this is what, if you wondered who was in the room tonight, there were at least 7 people, developer people, big developers over the last decade in Santa Cruz. They were here in the room tonight, all watching what's going on with this one. This is the big one. And I think, when you talk about neighbors and the neighborhood, and they call you NIMBYs, that's a pejorative term that is used and thrown out there by a lot of developers because you care about your neighborhood. And I've seen it time and time again up here in this council that neighbors are thrown under the bus frequently. And I could name 5 different projects where they were just not, they weren't listened to, or they listened to, you had your 2 minutes, and now we're off to making a decision. I have to say, I greatly appreciate the 6 affordable units. But as many people said, it's not the place, you know, and I wonder when we were talking about 1247 Pacific Avenue or 555 Pacific, why we didn't get any affordable units in those projects. I just couldn't, but yet here, and like, where were we? And I agree with Council Member Chase when she says that this is the best thing we've seen in a while, and I totally agree with those comments, but it definitely is not the right place, and I don't know where we were on these other projects that we didn't get any affordability. Just a couple comments. I mean, the vision that Judy Rose had about the houses around, 9 houses around benches and something that would fit into the neighborhood, wouldn't be as stark as you saw on the pictures, that transition, from, Graham Hill Road, which everybody would say that is pretty dense, even though they would call it medium density. I think it's pretty dense. The traffic we're not dealing with at all. Just us crossing the street today at a random, it was, I don't know what time it was in the afternoon, trying to get across that street, it was really, really difficult. So I'm just going to, I think we should send this back to the staff and look for a lower density. I don't think 32 units, although I appreciate the attempt, I don't think 32 units does it. I would, if there was a substitute motion, which I don't know if Councilmember Brown wants to make that, but vote no and direct the planning department to come back with a plan that everybody can live with, because we heard, and I know that I don't think that the neighbors can live with the 32 units as this project is now being voted on. So thank you, and thank you to the neighbors. I really appreciate your time and energy.
Yeah, I just want to ask. So the condition regarding the noise for the project, that's included in there, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We have a motion and second on the floor. It's been restated. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, that motion passes with Councilmember Crone and Councilmember Brown opposed, Councilmember Millian, Vice Mayor Watkins, Councilmember Matthews, Councilmember Chase, and myself in favor. So the meeting is now adjourned.
Mayor, could I get clarification regarding the affordable units?
Yeah, I thought we did. I thought that was clarified as part of the motion.
Just want to verify, was that the same? The condition didn't change, and so just want to make sure.
That is correct.
That was my understanding as well.
Yeah, that is correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. Hey,